Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to SpringBoard. This is our third year for SpringBoard, and we're super excited to see everyone this morning. We're going to give just a moment for everyone to roll in out of the waiting room. So if you'll bear with us for just a moment, and then we're going to get some housekeeping taken care of and then launch right in. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, and so we're going to get started right away. Welcome again to those of you that are just rolling in. We would love for you to put in the chat where you are joining us from in the state today. So we would like to see where everyone's coming from. And I really appreciate everyone that's sharing their camera. We also love to see your face, particularly at the beginning of each session. We certainly understand if you need to hide your camera, if you need to step away. But we would love to see your face. It's much more fun than just a name on the screen, and it helps our presenters also to see who they're talking to. All right, we've got Irmo. Let's see. Not too far from me. I'm in Blythewood. We've got some other staff in Elgin and downtown Columbia, Lexington. Ooh, Myrtle Beach. Oh, good. Millicent, you're near me in Blythewood. We'll have to connect and see where we are. Sumter, Lexington. Wow. Well, and we know one of our esteemed presenters is in Texas today. So far and wide, we are spreading our message, or she is spreading her message to you from far and wide. Good morning. Good morning. Well, like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover today, but welcome again to SpringBoard. This is our third annual conference. We have done things a lot of different ways over the past several years. We all know that the world is a different place than it was before 2020. And we're excited to have everyone here. And we're trying to find ways to make sure that we're meeting you where you are and meeting your needs in order to be able to participate. So thank you for making time on your Saturday morning. We know that women are extremely busy with work and kids and everything else. And we hope that Saturday morning is a good time for you to carve out time to make this happen. First off, I want to thank Duke Energy and Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina for their support of this event and for their leadership in promoting diversity and gender parity in our governing bodies. We really couldn't do this without them. We're able to offer some scholarships because of them. So again, thank you, Duke Energy and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Most of you already know, but I'm going to remind everyone about South Carolina Women in Leadership's mission. You know what? I'm sorry. I should introduce myself also. I am Sarah Ballard, and I am with South Carolina Women in Leadership. I make assumptions that everybody has been to our trainings before, but that may not be the case. So I am our person that you're mostly going to see when we do training. So if you join or participate in other events, I'll be a familiar face for you, and certainly always a resource if you ever have questions. And I'll make sure to get you hooked up with the right staff person as you move through your leadership journey. So again, welcome. South Carolina Women in Leadership is a multi-partisan group of women working together to move South Carolina forward by informing, inspiring, and involving women in leadership on public boards and commissions and in elective office. And we have set a really lofty goal for ourselves to triple the number of women running for elected and appointed office in 2024. And that equates to a lot of women across the state. And so we need your help. We need you to step into leadership. We need you to help refer other women that are qualified and that you would be excited to have represent you. So we thank you for taking that first step today, or for those of you that are already serving on boards and commissions and are interested in increasing your effectiveness and learning more. Thank you for being here and your service heart, your willingness to serve in the community and to continue to be more effective and to increase women's influence in our government. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of vacant seats across the state on boards and commissions. There are so many opportunities out there to serve for all citizens, and in particular for women, to step in and have our perspectives represented. So we're going to talk a lot today about how to find those opportunities, how to find the right opportunity for you, how to apply, how to lobby for yourself to be appointed, and then how to be effective once you are appointed. So we will be sharing contact information for all of our presenters, their slides, handouts, replays from the sessions in an email at the beginning of next week. I always like to start with that because we'll get questions in the chat. Are we going to get this slide deck? You're going to get everything that you need. at the first of the week to follow up if you want to contact any of the presenters directly, or reference anything that they've said either through the recording or their presentations. And just a couple of other housekeeping items. Again, thank you for those of you that are sharing your cameras. We love to see that. And please do continue to do so. But if you do need to step away, take care of yourselves. We've got a long morning. We do have a break built in a little bit after the first couple sessions, but we have a lot to cover. We know y'all are busy and you probably have to go to soccer games and a million other things this afternoon. And we want to get all of this information to you before you have to drop off. So feel free to hide your camera if you need to step away to get a drink of water or for any other purpose. We certainly understand, and we're just going to let you take care of that yourself, and we'll keep trucking right on through. So again, welcome to SpringBoard. For those of you that are just joining on, if you haven't already, please let us know in the chat where you're joining from. We would love to see where all y'all are representing. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our first two presenters. So our first session is Leading in the Private Sector, Serving on a Corporate or Nonprofit Board. And we're going to start out today by, we mostly focus on public appointed boards and commissions, and that's at the city, county, and statewide level. But we know that there are other opportunities to serve as well. And so we wanted to have two people that, couldn't represent that sector any better. And that's Karen Jenkins, who is the chair-elect of the Columbia Chamber of Commerce and a member of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce Executive Board, and also the president and CEO of KRJ Consulting, and Naomi Lett, the president and CEO of the United Way of South Carolina. So we're going to pull up their slide deck. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them and let them talk to you about that particular sector, how those boards are different from public appointed boards, and how nonprofit is different than corporate. So thank you, Karen and Naomi. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your expertise. We appreciate seeing you on Saturday morning, and I'm going to let y'all take it away.
And thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation from Barbara Rax and all the effort that Sarah has done in getting us to this point. Naomi and I are just going to kind of have a conversation, if that's okay with you ladies. If you want to go ahead and advance the slide for me. So that's who we are, of course. Just for those of you who don't know, I'm Karen Jenkins with KRJ Consulting. We just celebrated our 15th year, and we provide organization development and leadership development on the non-federal side and professional administrative and IT support services on the federal side. So I come to you from the lens of an entrepreneur and a former banker and mortgage banker. And of course, I'll let Naomi, if you want to give some additional information on yourself before we get started.
Certainly. I'm Naomi Lett. I'm the president and CEO of the United Way of South Carolina. So I support all of the United Ways across the state in their endeavors to advance health, education, and financial stability.
Be on this panel with you, Naomi. You advance the slide, please.
There we go. So the question is serving on a nonprofit or corporate board the right fit for me? So talking through the qualifications and experience and the time commitment. So I think in the nonprofit world, or I would say in the United Way world and with our partners, that really varies. I think nonprofits rely more on their board members to help fill gaps in the ways that they're unable to, where they don't have staff or capacity, right? So I think as you think about your board service, thinking about what talents you have and what you bring, what you offer to the organization and how you might help out, because nonprofits usually have more work than they have people. So I think that there isn't one specific qualification or type of experience that you have. A lot of times nonprofit boards will have profiles, someone with a legal background, someone with a finance background. If you have marketing or graphic design, there are ways you can bring your talent. And the time commitment can vary. And I think that really depends on the person, like how much how involved do you want to be? So we have members of our board who come to the quarterly business meetings, really helping in an advisory capacity at those board meetings and with information we send out. And then we have others who are highly involved in our public policy committee, go to the State House, do a lot of work in that way. So I think the time commitment can vary based on the places that you want to help and serve. But I think at a minimum, we have 4-hour board meetings once a quarter. And that's where we sort of walk through the business of our work. And so at a minimum, it's about, I would say about 8 hours a quarter. Karen?
So on the corporate boards, it's a little bit different as far as like when you look at the reason that the boards are there and what are the differences between the two. So from a nonprofit, they're more focused on social and charitable issues and depend a lot on donations. Whereas on the corporate side, their whole mission is to maximize shareholder value and to ensure long-term success. There are a lot of similarities in the functionalities of the board, but you have to realize the differences. So one of the biggest differences is as a nonprofit, most of those positions are volunteer. Most of the corporate boards, you're going to find a scenario where they were going to pay you in the form of fees or in equity in that particular business if you get to that level. It is a lot more challenging to get onto a corporate board than it is to get on a nonprofit board. But most of the people that have started on the nonprofit, they start on the nonprofit to get the experience, to get their names out there and to understand how a board functions. So that's a great way to start if you're looking at moving over to the corporate side. Now, corporate could also be similar to what I'm doing, not necessarily corporate to corporate, but I currently serve on the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, which is around businesses and corporations, as the vice chair. And I'm serving on the state chamber on their small business committee. I serve on the business. I am the business committee, small business committee chair. So it is the time commitment depending on the board. I know Naomi said they do 4 hours once a quarter. Our state chamber, we meet once a quarter, and it's probably more like 2.5 hours. Our other board meets monthly, so that's 1 hour. The more time is spent when you're on the executive board than when you're on the full board. Full boards, for example, in the chamber, I think they meet every other month for an hour, and the executive board meets monthly. Most of the work of a board, regardless of whether it's nonprofit or corporate, is going to be done in subcommittees. So it's not just about making the meeting, it's also about serving on the subcommittee, and that might also meet once a month. But that's where the actual grunt work of the organization or the board is actually completed.
And Karen and Naomi, you both have mentioned time at board meetings and time at committee meetings. And I think it's probably very difficult to make a generalization, but in terms of preparing for meetings or work that you might need to do outside of an actual meeting setting, could you speak a little bit to that?
From my perspective, it is, of course, you read whatever materials the board is presenting to you, and you never want to go into a board meeting ill-prepared, especially when you go into executive session and you're going to have to vote on things. You don't want to vote on things blindly. So when they give you materials, it's really about being caught up on reading the minutes from the previous meeting, because you're going to have to approve those, making sure that whatever content they're giving you, we just did a strategic plan with the full state board. So that was some time taken to read through a 11, 12-page document to make sure that we understood what it was, give feedback. So from the preparation side, it is, again, depending on the board and depending on what they're giving you, if you have a presentation. But like I said, majority of the time outside of that 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever it is going to be spent in working on committees on our side.
Yeah, I would concur with Karen. I think it's the same. So you have the preparation time, and to be educated about the topic itself. So, I think you can spend another 3 hours outside of the board meetings, per month, learning about different aspects of the work that's going on. And oftentimes, we share communications, we give updates on policy, and really how read in you want to be will be the amount of time that you spend as well.
And I'll also add, from being supportive of the organization, there are times when the organization may have events. And it's good to have board members that participate and that show up. Sometimes there's the annual gala. Of course, everybody wants to go to that, but there are other programs that may not include or need the entire board, but it's nice to see board members, not that you have to go to everyone, but if the board can kind of divide and conquer and have someone represented from the board at most of the events that they have, that's also some time that might need to be spent.
Very good. Well, thank you. I appreciate the insight, and I know, like you said, it's difficult to make a generalization in terms of qualifications and experience, depending on the role that you're filling on that board. So thank you for giving us some overviews on that.
So it looks like I might have spoken on this one already. So I'll let Naomi share from her perspective, and then I'll fill in any gaps that we might have.
Okay, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, it really depends on the organization. In the nonprofit world, it depends on the organization and their capacity. Really being able to, so the roles and responsibilities, right? So really being able to bring your personal talents, and that can be everything from, you become the voice of the nonprofit, you become the promoter of the work that they do. So I think that's a really important role that you play as a board member. Our board members do a lot to lift up United Way and the investments that we make in the community. If there are opportunities to volunteer, they certainly participate and promote participation in that, right? Because it's about, I think, sort of like sharing your enthusiasm for what you care about and where you're spending your time and energy that draws people in. So, being able to bring your talents to the work, and then being able to promote the organization that you're helping with. Compensation, nonprofit boards don't have compensation. They vary from corporate boards in exactly that way. It is truly volunteer time. So some boards offer stipends. And I think that this is an important thing for us to revisit, right? Because there are people who have difficulty participating because of economics, right? So this is something that we're talking about in the nonprofit world, about who is able to participate, and is that equitable when we want voices at the table, but the compensation piece might keep people out.
And Naomi, in terms of expectations, not only the compensation piece, but the expectation oftentimes that a board member on a nonprofit is expected to also make a personal contribution, a financial contribution, or to seek out others who can make a contribution in lieu of them making that sort of a donation themselves. Can you talk just a little bit about that, and about, I think it's I'm excited that the nonprofit world is addressing that we need a lot of perspectives, not just people who can necessarily afford to serve without compensation, or who can even serve without compensation and make a financial contribution.
Yes. So thank you for queuing that up, Sarah. I did not include that, but that's an important point. So I think as you're looking at a nonprofit, which relies on donations and grants and other things, the board 100% board participation in giving is a big part. So if a nonprofit applies for a grant, say from the Gates Foundation, or really any foundation that gives grants, one of the questions that they ask is, do you have 100% giving on your board? And if the answer is no, oftentimes that counts against the nonprofit, because if the leadership of if the board leadership doesn't contribute, fully, then, it's a question of, do you have the support you need as an organization, and is your mission valued sufficiently? So, and, different boards have different amounts or expectations for what that might be. But yeah, it's very important, and not just for the sake of the resources that the organization has, but because that is sort of that's a pass-through question for organizations seeking grants and resources for the work that they do. So yeah, thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up, because that is a really important piece of service.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this fits under roles and responsibilities, but could each of you maybe give some examples of the types of decisions? Karen mentioned, and you mentioned, Naomi, being prepared, knowing the material, coming to the meeting ready to, vote on particular issues. And maybe this will also help us give a sort of a perspective on what's different or what's similar between nonprofit and corporate. What are the kind of decisions that you would be discussing and voting on and making decisions on as a governing body?
So generically, and this is where a lot of boards get in trouble. A board is designed to kind of set the direction or policy of where we're going, and to do oversight and monitoring. It's when a board decides that they want to get into the day-to-day operation. That's what a Naomi is for. Naomi is there to guide, hey, tell me where I need to go, and then she goes and executes. A lot of boards cross that line, and that's when a lot of boards get in trouble. But it truly is the setting, the direction, the policy, the guidance of where we want to go, and then monitoring to make sure that that's happening, and then sitting back and letting your leadership that you've hired take on that role. And I have seen numerous boards overstep that boundary, and it does not go well for the organization.
Yes, Karen, I would thoroughly agree. And I'll give a few concrete examples. So on our board, we have human resources. We have expertise in human resources. They help us review our employee handbook, right? And keep it up to date, make sure that all of the reviews are happening in a timely manner, and help support our capacity in that way. My treasurer, last year, we had the opportunity to manage a large amount of funds through the American Rescue Plan Act. And so I was able to sit down with my treasurer and think through, what additional organizational capacity do we have? So as board members, you really play a support role for the leadership and staff of the organization, right? Because it's our expertise along with your vantage point and expertise that come together.
And just, kind of a lot of boards, before they place people on their boards, they do what they call a board audit or board skills audit. And they say, okay, we don't want all IT professionals. We don't want all industry professionals. We don't want all, compliance and accounting people. But there should be a diverse group of people. So if you have some experience in compliance and accounting, legal, regulatory, HR, marketing, PR, IT, that particular industry, those are some of the things that may put you in a position to be on a board at a specific time, because they need that particular skill set. So
Very
when
good.
we look at the how to serve, you develop your expertise, whatever that is, and get experience serving on boards. Start on some very small boards, start, locally, and get the experience understanding the board governance, their programs, guidelines, networking, that you can understand board governance, enhancing your visibility. I've learned a long time ago, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And it's not about what you can get out of it. It really is about what I call paying your civic rent. This is what my mentor, Dr. Lewis Lynn, shared with me. Paying your civic rent means that I'm going into the organization to serve, not to be served. And that pays off a long way, because then people begin to know you, not who you know, and that positions you to get into these positions. Finding a mentor that has been on a board or that understands the board that can help guide you. And then if you really want to go wild, especially on the corporate, you can hire an executive search firm if you want to go wild on that. But I'll turn it over to Naomi and see if she has any other tips on, how do you go about, for example, applying for your board?
So we're lucky in South Carolina. We have an organization called Together SC, and that they represent, or they're an association of all the nonprofits across the state. So they're a great place to reach out. Madeline McGee is the leader there, and Ben Bullock is her co-pilot. And so they can really tell you the opportunities that are out there. I think the best way, so the networking, I appreciate that that's the first bullet point, because it really is about, are there events that this organization holds? Are there ways to connect and show up and demonstrate your curiosity and commitment through that, right? So a lot of organizations will have annual fundraising events. So that's one way to get connected with an organization that you're interested in. The name of the organization is called Together SC. That's the nonprofit association. So Together South Carolina. That's the Association of Nonprofits. So you can find out information about all the nonprofits across South Carolina, and if there are opportunities for board service, and they can really give you advice and navigation. Applying, you do need to send your resume, because like we talked about, that's an important piece of the puzzle, and sort of a why you want to serve statement. So your CV, right? The equivalent of that. So the appointment process for us, we nominate once a year. So you might express interest, if you came to us in August, you wouldn't be considered for the board until the following June. So understanding the timing of that organization's nomination process is also important. But indicating your desire to serve, and then asking about, are there other ways in the meanwhile that I can be of service to the organization, I think is a great way to demonstrate your willingness in advance and really be able to take a position on the board.
So we have that, ladies. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
To give an example of what Naomi was saying, I started out on boards by volunteering on one of their subcommittees. The Community Relations Council years ago needed somebody to work on the housing committee. So I was actually serving there, and that serving on the subcommittee led me into a relationship that eventually led me to the serving on the board and eventually chairing the organization. So that is a great strategy if you're looking to get involved.
So you've talked about how do you find a board and sort of you seeking a board. But Dawn had a really good question about what questions you should ask when you're joining. You want to make sure that you are affiliating yourself with a company or an organization that you are going to be proud to be affiliated with, that's going to, help you build your credibility and your reputation. So like, what kind of probing questions or information, what questions should you ask? What information should you review before you agree to join, so that you don't get yourself into a situation where there's maybe legal issues or, an organization that doesn't match your personal values?
Let's talk about the research first. I think you have to do the research first. The last thing you want to do is go ask a question that's, blatantly on Google. But I think you do want to go and look at your personal core values and identify what those are, and then go and look at that organization's core values to ensure that there's alignment. They don't need to marry or mirror each other, but they do need to align. Once you discover that, you want to do some research on the organization. Have they been in trouble? Are there any issues in the news? If it's a nonprofit, you can go out to the state and see if they're on that Scrooge list or whatever else is going on with them. But I think the big research is important up front. And I'll defer to Naomi, it's really your specific precedents as far as what you're looking for to decide what questions you want to ask if the information that you're seeking is not readily available in any of your research.
Yeah, I think it's important. So our board members are fiduciaries. So that means that you are financially responsible for the organization, and that's a big role to take on, right? So We have directors and operators insurance, which means if we have some sort of issue or violation that the insurance covers any costs. But as a board member, you are a fiduciary. So I think the most important thing you can do, and Karen alluded to this, is go to the Secretary of State. You can do a charity search and look at the 990s, right? Because when you come on as a board member, you come on as a person who says, I will take responsibility for this organization. And so understanding the financial position and looking at several years. So looking at several years of the tax documentation, if there's any audit findings, organizations will have audit findings because it can be as simple as you didn't keep receipts for something. If they have a material weakness, right? There is certain language in the audits. So, and a lot of organizations will have that. I think if you're looking to serve, that you can ask an organization if they've had audits and if you can see those, because the financial responsibility that you bear is an important piece of the puzzle, and you want to make sure that smaller organizations won't necessarily have that, but they're not as high risk either, right? So if you're serving on a large nonprofit like ours, last year we supported $12 million worth of funding going out to communities. That's a large amount of money and a very large risk, right? So our board members want to make sure that our audits are clean, that our finances are well managed, and that's particularly important to them.
And you both mentioned, some of the legal responsibility of a board. Is there anything else that you feel like in that legal realm that these ladies that are with us today should be aware of, that a board is responsible for legally?
I think there's some inherent risk. And again, the decisions of the board and what happens with the board. And I'm not an attorney, so please don't take any of this with any grain of attorneyhood. But because it's so important to have that board director insurance, because that covers the board members. And if they don't have it, then you really don't want to serve on that board, because they can now come after you.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably, again, like Naomi mentioned, something that with a smaller certainly always ask, but with a smaller nonprofit, sometimes somebody's just getting started in the community and they may not even know, they have a good heart and they want to do something in the community to help, but they don't necessarily know all of the ins and outs of that, and that would be somewhere to be really cautious.
So let's use that as an example. If you have a newer board and you're going to consider that, you want to ask that director, the board members, who else is on the board? What other talent? And if you don't have an attorney, you probably need one to serve, and not over, doing the work or whatever. But part of that oversight means that if I don't have the talent, then I need to bring it in initially to serve on my board. Boards turn over all the time based on their skills. A newer board needs this particular skill sets to get started. They're in it 3 years later, they have another need. So they have another group of board members with another set of talents. But again, you want to mitigate risk on your end and ensure that the organization is mitigating on theirs as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I have another question, but I just want to encourage it. We are getting to about our time limit, and this has been so valuable. If anyone else has any questions, please do drop them in the chat. One of the other questions that I wanted to ask, and you mentioned about boards turning over. Tell me what you think, or is it important to have something in the bylaws or policies for an organization where there are terms of service? And, how do you feel about that? I mean, some boards, people are on there for their life. And is that a good thing, a bad thing? Maybe there's not just one answer to that.
Yes. So I think terms are incredibly important, right? Both because, just like anything, a board can be a great support system, but a board can also be dysfunctional, right? So I think that as an organization, board terms can be a means of protection, right? From singular ideas beginning to run the organization, right? And you also need to introduce fresh talent and fresh opportunities. So bylaws state that we have 3-year terms, and you can serve 3-year terms, but also if there is an issue after a 3-year term, so if as a board member you don't want to serve anymore, it gives you the opportunity to examine whether or not you want to do that. A lot of boards have 2-year terms, but I think that that is particularly important. And also because it just infuses new idea and new people, right? I think longstanding leadership is one element and important because you sort of have these guiding folks, but you need checks and balances. And without service terms and your bylaws, it takes away the checks and balances for the board members, because you need to have checks and balances for the staff and what happens with the organization. And that's what an executive review is for, but it's equally as important for the board members.
I agree wholeheartedly. You doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is the definition of insanity. I've seen boards that have stayed the same and they become stale. Same mindset, same thought process. And if you're not injecting new ideas, diverse perspectives, it becomes a challenge and the organization is not going to live out to its fullest potential. So I do agree. Most of the boards that I'm on have terms. The one I used to have, it was appointed by city, county, and they had 2-3-year, you could do 2-3-year terms consecutive, and then you had to fall off. But you could come back if you wanted to reapply. But most people don't, they're off into their new world. But I think having an opportunity, and it also gives other people, like, look at this audience right here. There are probably plenty of people on this call that want to serve. And if we didn't have these limits, then most people would get on those boards and stay there forever. And it doesn't give, new talent. And this is an awesome audience right here with wonderful ideas and that would bring a lot to the table, but they would never get an opportunity to serve if we didn't have those limits.
And is it typical for corporate boards to have term limits as well?
Yeah, most of them do. It's a bit harder to get on those. But yeah. And unfortunately with corporate boards, and they're changing, right? Most corporate boards they're not required to have diversity. And I'm not saying necessarily diversity in race, diversity even in gender, diversity in thought, diversity in culture. California has a law now that all of their publicly traded boards have to have at least one woman on it. That's a good start. But there's value in ensuring that we have different people and different thought processes as we're making decisions for any organization.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we could stay and talk about this probably for the entire time. And like I said, so much ground to cover today, but this has been so valuable. Thank you for giving us that perspective. And this is going to be really helpful as we move throughout the day and look at how does a public board look different. But like you've said, these are all opportunities to serve and make our community a better place, and part of building that experience for whatever you want, your journey to be as a woman in leadership. So Naomi and Karen, thank you again for being here. Thank you for getting up on a Saturday morning. It's pretty early in Austin, Texas. I don't know if you have adjusted to the time there, but you look fantastic for as early as it is. And we're grateful for you getting up and doing this amidst everything else you both have going on. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll share contact information for Karen and Naomi so that if there's anything specifically that y'all want to reach out to them about, that you'll be able to do that after the session is over. So thanks again, ladies. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, so we are just going to keep rolling right along. Our second session today is starting at home, serving on a local appointed board. And we are lucky enough this morning to have Dr. Kim Roberts, who is the Fairfield County Clerk to Council with us. We're getting her slide deck pulled up. And welcome. Good morning. I haven't spoken to her yet this morning, but thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kim. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go ahead and launch right into talking about really, what's the nitty gritty of a local board? What does that look like in terms of what opportunities are available at the local level? And so now we've shifted, now we're talking about public boards and commissions. which is what really Women in Leadership focuses on, is getting more women in our government. But again, I think that, having all of this information about boards, we certainly want women to be in the community, increasing their qualifications, increasing their influence, so that they're ready to, we say, fill the pipeline, whether you ever want to serve an elected office or whether you want to be on a statewide board or commission, just building that experience that matches with your interests and the way that you want to help improve your community. So again, welcome, Dr. Kim. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was having some technical difficulties this morning. My laptop decided that it did not want me to do this from my laptop, and so I am struggling as I try to do this from my cell phone, so please forgive me. I did contact Emily to let her know I was having some difficulties. So I see beautiful ladies on my screen. I don't see my PowerPoint, so I'm not quite sure if that's forthcoming or if it's a thing because I'm on my cell phone.
It is up, and so we're on the first slide. We'll do like a little bit of closed captioning, or I'll do that out loud. And then when you just let Emily know to advance the slide, then we can confirm that you've got up what you're looking at. So you're on that first introductory slide now.
That's okay. Hold on
and
one
thank
second.
you for rolling with it, y'all. We are casual, and we know that we just have to do what we have to do to make it happen. You look fantastic. I think if you hadn't said anything, no one would have known the difference. So don't stress about it. We're all friends.
Yeah, I'm going off the cuff. Typically, I would have made a copy of my PowerPoint, but I didn't. So give me some feedback. What's the first one? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So we've got role of boards and commissions in your local government.
Okay. All right. So basically, the role is, the first word that comes to my mind is just to be involved. It allows citizens to be involved in the local government process. My belief is that true government begins locally. The rules, the ordinances, the resolutions, all of those things directly impact us as local citizens. And so it's fine to vote in the primary when the president, to elect your president. That's great. I do believe true local government begins at home, because that is what affects us immediately. And so I think that the main goal is outside of voting, which I think, again, is very important. I think the next most important would be able to serve on a board or a commission, because it gives you a voice that will be heard probably a little bit louder and more instantly versus a vote, at elections. And so I think it's really important. And I think the main role is to involve citizens and connect them to their local government representatives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll just kind of hit on your bullet points. Serving as an advisory body to direct policy and increasing public input and participation in policies and operating procedures. And I think you've covered that very well. So, Emily, can you advance our slides, please? So now we've got how boards and commissions function, how the appointments are made, guidelines for meeting, establishing your leadership, your positions on your board, like chair, secretary, that meetings are recorded and sometimes provided to council, and taking action with recommendations.
Okay, great. You kind of summed that up in my slide for me. Thank you. Basically, again, serving on a board or a commission, we know that they do meet periodically according to what their guidelines and their standards are. That is where you actually go in and you talk it out, whatever the issues are, whatever the problems are, you go in, you talk it out amongst your other peers, other citizens, other people that are in from different backgrounds, but at the same time, they could be your neighbor for all you know. And so therefore you go in, you make these decisions. Some of these boards have the authority to per se take a vote and have that vote transferred over to the actual legislative body. The first one that comes to mind is like planning and zoning. Planning and zoning, those people that are on those boards actually take a vote, and that vote is forwarded to full council for full council to either agree with that or disagree with it. They shoot it up, as we say, or they'll shoot it down. And so in regards to the function, it basically advises the legislative bodies on a wide variety of policies. It just depends on the board that you're actually serving in, or on, rather.
And we have a tip from Regina. She said that if you swipe to your screen to the right, that it should take you back to the main screen and you may be able to see your PowerPoint on your phone. Thank you, Regina.
Let's see, Regina, because this is brand new for me. It's swiping and it's not, oh. Well, now I only see Sarah. So
Oh, no. Well, that is not an ideal situation for sure. Well, we'll just keep rolling. Emily, next slide. So types of boards you can expect to find, and holler if you want me to kind of read what's on there, or if you want to go through those. Oh, you are muted now, Kim.
Okay, here we go.
We gotcha.
All right. Yes. Okay. I can kind of say some off the top of my head. Basically in both positions at Richland County and currently at Fairfield, it's been my responsibility for the boards and commissions and to fill those seats. And so I've already mentioned planning and zoning. You have boards like the library board, for the airport commission, or in Fairfield County, we call it aeronautics, the Council on Aging, zoning, Board of Appeals. Let's see, what am I missing on my slide?
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
think disability and
Department-
special needs.
disabilities and special needs. The hospital board is another one that's pretty high on the list, prioritizing. Did I miss any?
No, I
had on
think
my
you got
slide?
them
I'm not
all. And I
sure.
think that that's a really good example of, there are for where you may be a nurse, you may be a builder, you may be, whatever the case may be, there are lots of opportunities based on what you're experienced in and what you're interested in to serve in these ways in your community. So, they're just a really wide ranging, opportunity for the kind of oversight that these boards have.
Mhm.
Let's go to the next slide, Emily. So how to find opportunities to serve.
I think the first one I put on the slide was Match, of course, that we all know about. And then I think there's a website there for organization. I think the second one was Gap. I call it Gap. That was just mine.
We call it Gap too. We call it Gap too. And so as Kim is mentioning, you guys are going to hear more about matchboard.tech. If you don't already know about it, it's fantastic. And we are going to be doing a demonstration in just a little bit. So you'll get to know more about that. And then GAP is our governmental appointments project. So that is where Women in Leadership has pulled opportunities to serve from cities and counties and statewide opportunities all into one database for you to go click on the community that you live in and get linked up with what positions are open, how do you apply? So those are to hit those first 2 points. Thank you.
I believe I also included on the slide, you could contact your local representative, city or county representative. They should be able to connect you with someone. If they don't know the boards and commission vacancies that they would have access to find that information for you. You could also utilize your local government website. Usually that's one of the first places where boards and commission vacancies will be advertised. Also social media, which is a huge thing. Most local government agencies have social media outlets. And so they will utilize that to post their vacancies for boards and commissions. And then of course, your local clerk to council would definitely be a key. She or he would definitely be able to let you know what's available, how to fill out the application, where you can find the application. The entire process will come definitely from the clerk to council.
Yeah, and I would say that the first 2 bullet points that are opportunities to use will resources to find boards and commissions were born out of widely varying levels of information availability across the state. So you're going to have some cities and counties that their website is updated. They have lots of information. There are some smaller communities that may not. And so I think that the point really being that those bullet points of ways to find out is be persistent. If you want to serve, don't be shy about calling the clerk and saying, I don't see anything on your website. what opportunities, here's what I'm interested in, or I heard about this, or your representatives. I mean, they are there to serve you. You are the citizen. And so please don't be shy if you can't find the information you need about seeking it out. And Emily, that's helping us with our slides, is also our director of boards and commissions. She can help you find those opportunities as well if you're having trouble with that. So Kim, what the application and appointment process looks like how do you go through that? What does that look like?
Okay, so once you find a commission or a board that you would like to serve on, and there's a vacancy in your district, then you get the application and you fill it out. So for me, it's very important that, first of all, you're very familiar with the board or commission that you're interested in. To me, it's kind of like applying for a job. Although this is you don't get paid for this for serving, it's voluntary. However, I look at it as a job. And so my application represents me. And so you want to make sure the application is filled out completely and thoroughly. Even if it doesn't apply to you, put NA and keep moving. It's important that you know who your council representative is and the district that you live in. I've seen way too many applications come across the table and they do not know who their council representative is and they don't know the district that they live in. And so to get that, most of the applications will come through the clerk to council first, and they'll be vetted, and then they'll go forward to full council. And so as the clerk or the person who sees that application initially, when you don't know who your council representative is or who your district is, more than likely, me personally, I wouldn't forward it, mainly because when the council gets it, if that's not filled out, they're kind of personally offended that you would want to serve on a board that represents my district, but you don't even know who I am. So at least know the name of the person that you are in the district, your representative, and then know the district that you're in. Include those things on the application and any other information that you feel like would be pertinent to the application, including a resume if you have it. And then continuing with that process, once you have turned in your application, if you don't hear back within like 24, 48 hours, it is perfectly okay for you to call the clerk to council's office and say, hey, I just want to make sure that you received my application, give them that information and verify that it's been received. You should then get information in regards to when your application will go before council. Now, some council, you go through an actual interview process. When I was at Richland County, when the applications came in and they were vetted, we had a rules and appointments board that met once a month at least to go over these applications and try to fill the vacancies in the boards and commissions. And so interviews were actually scheduled, and they actually came into the building, sat down before that team, and there was a Q&A. It was about maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but still it was in person. Here, where I'm at now at Fairfield, there's not the case. I get the application, I forward it to council, they vet it, and then they vote. Either way it goes, your application goes before the council in an official meeting, and the council will vote on whether or not your application has been accepted. Now, if you can't make it to the council meeting, that's fine, but it would be nice if you could make it to the actual council meeting so that you could see firsthand and then actually get the opportunity to see the council and meet your council representative, just in case you had not up until that point. After your appointment, typically the clerk to council will contact you either by phone the next morning, next day or two. I would do it the next morning. And then I would automatically send out a letter that congratulates them on their appointment. That letter would go to the director of that commission as well, and then also to the council person that they're going to be representing. And then from that point, the director will reach out to the newly appointed person and give them instruction as to what happens next.
Perfect. And you mentioned, as part of that, getting to know the board that you're interested in serving on. And, you said that attend a meeting where your application will be considered. For the most part, are other meetings of the boards like public? And so, if you're interested in serving, either before you submit an application or, after you've submitted while you're waiting for your appointment, is it a good idea to go to those, actually show up at those meetings and go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks that are currently on that committee?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think that these are people that you are going to be working with. And the sooner you are able to put a name with a face, and to see who that person is, to get a feel for who it is you're going to be sitting next to and across from when you attend these meetings, will just make the process a whole lot easier, will make you more comfortable with the process as well. And I think it's just a win-win. So I think it's extremely important.
Very good. Next slide. So really, we've come to questions, and let me scroll back. I'm going to look and see. I know we talked a bit about legal and financial liabilities and responsibilities with the corporate boards and nonprofit boards. How does that come into play with public boards? I mean, I know a lot of times that these boards and commissions are making decisions about how funds are allocated and maybe what firms might be hired for certain contracts. So they mentioned the D&O insurance and that kind of piece of it with nonprofits and corporate. How does that factor into public boards? You know, what is the personal liability of board members for the decisions that they make on a public board?
I think it's, I would say, maybe not vastly different, but I think it's different. I have never come across a situation where someone served on a board and a decision, because basically you have one voice and one vote per se. And so it's the majority that actually makes the rule, whether or not your vote goes forward to council or whether it stays, within your organization independently. But I think it starts at a more of a personal type thing and a moral type thing versus it being legal and financial. I think that the decisions that you make when you serve on these boards and commissions, it says something about your morals and your core values, more so than I've never heard of of someone being sued because of a decision that they made in a board or a commission, or having any type of financial liability in regards to that. Again, I think it has more to do with who you are at the core, and based on the decisions and the vote that you make and the opinions that you verbalize. I think it speaks to who you are as a person, morally and ethically.
Yeah, sure. And Kim, when you are looking at applications and when council is looking at applications, how do you look upon previous service on nonprofit boards? So if nonprofit was sort of a starting point for someone, they gained some experience, they learned about procedural kind of things. Do you feel like that is a good qualification to have, or is something that you consider to be positive when someone does apply for a public board or commission, having that nonprofit board background?
I think it depends on the actual board or commission that you're applying for. I've seen where a person has no experience, but has a true desire to serve. And council takes that under consideration and will make the appointment. I've seen the opposite. I've seen some that have had nonprofit experience. And for this particular board or commission, the team decided that it was not a good fit. And I think also in the same vein, kind of sort of, is there are lots of boards and commissions that are very difficult to fill for whatever reason. People don't know that they're vacant. People don't know or have not given much thought to the opportunity to serve. And I think some people feel as though, oh, well, these seats have been vacant for years. I can just apply. I know that they will accept me. And that is a misconception. That is not the case whatsoever. The persons that are appointed to these boards and commissions, it's not done haphazardly, at least the experiences that I have had. They take into consideration your application and your resume. If, again, I think it's kind of like a job interview. I have no legal background whatsoever. So there's no need for me to go to a law firm and apply for, an attorney's position when I have no clue what I'm doing. And so they try their very best in choosing board and commission members to make sure that it's going to be a fairly decent fit and something that's going to benefit that board and commission as well as the person who's applying for the position.
Sure. So couple more questions. So Emily, our board and commission director, said that she's seen cases where board members are removed for not attending enough meetings. So can you speak to the attendance expectations for public appointed boards?
Yes. They have each commissioner board has their own set of bylaws. And typically in those bylaws, it will state that there are a certain number of meetings that you cannot miss. Otherwise, you will be removed. And so these things are covered with the newly appointed member upon their orientation. And so some boards, it could be 3 meetings. It just depends, because all boards don't meet monthly. Some of them may meet every other month. It just depends on the board. Some of them meet as needed. It just depends. And so according to each individual bylaw stated by that commission or board, there are a certain number of meetings that you cannot miss. And if you do, then you will be removed. That is true.
Sure. And then last question is compensation. I think you mentioned it just sort of as an aside a few minutes ago, but typically is there compensation and for serving on a public board?
Typically, there's not. It is strictly on a volunteer basis. I have yet to come across a local board or commission where there was some type of incentive, financial incentive given. It's strictly something that it has to come from the heart. It has to be a desire that you have in order to be able to serve and to give back to your community, to be able to connect and make change at a local level. Has absolutely nothing to do with money. So if there's anybody considering serving on a local board, thinking that they will be compensated financially, I'm so sorry to disappoint, but it's not going to happen.
Well, and I'm going to sort of, the compensation is, solving a problem that you see in the community, making your community a better place, which I think that a lot of times, can be even more gratifying than money, seeing that your community is a better place and that, something that's bothering you. And I think that's why a lot of women serve, is that they see something that's bothering them. They don't feel like their perspective has been represented and they want to jump in there and fix it. So I think that can be as gratifying, if not more so, than having a little bit of extra money in your pocket. Well,
Exactly.
thank you so much for all of this information. And I will say that our next session is going to be a demonstration on Matchboard. So people are going to find out even more about how to find opportunities to serve, and look at the software platform that we have available, that we are working on spreading across the state to make boards appointments easier to find, give citizens the opportunity to find those places to serve, and make that service more diverse and have more transparency in government. So thank you so much for what you do in the public sector. I know that, it's often a thankless job, I'm sure, working behind the scenes to make all this happen for us. So, and thank you again for rolling with the punches when there are a little bit of technical difficulties. That's the world we live in. So thank you. You did a beautiful job overcoming that as well. We're so grateful for having you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to roll right into our a new solution, appointments in the digital age. So this is a perfect segue, right? Like we said, where technology is where we are right now. But there are still lots of governments across the state that do not make their opportunities digitally available. And so I'm going to turn it over to Emily Bowerman. She's our director of boards and commissions, and she was really integral in developing the Matchboard application. So she's going to talk about how it came about, how it was developed. And then we are all lucky enough to have Christy Lindsay, who is the clerk for the city of Spartanburg, who's going to run us through a demo of that tool. So without further ado, Emily, if you want to get us started, tell us about Matchboard, tell us about where it came from and how it's going to help us find opportunities to serve.
Absolutely. So as Sarah said, my name is Emily Bowerman and I manage the appointed office projects for women in leadership. So since WIL was founded, we've done a focus on boards and commissions. We know not everybody wants to run for office. Some people are like me and prefer to work in the background and not be the public face. But sometimes you also want to build up your experience before you run for office, and serving on a board and commission is a great way to do that. You see the nuts and bolts of how government works. So we started by creating a database of available board and commission positions at the county, city, and state level. Creating the local database was especially challenging. I've often resorted to combing through county council minutes to try to find what positions are currently available. It's really difficult and time consuming. And if you imagine, like, that's my full-time job, and if I'm having that much trouble finding out what positions are available, it's even harder for the average woman who is also juggling a job, a family, hobbies, having a life. So That's why GAP was really important to us. And then on the other side of it, we were seeing from citizens that they were submitting applications and they weren't appointed. They didn't know why. They never heard that their application was received. So there was a lot of confusion and frustration on that side. And then the clerks were also having a lot of difficulties. They were saying that they were having to manage their board and commission information across dozens of spreadsheets and then update them and send them to IT to ask IT to update the website and manage paper applications, which got even more complicated in COVID when everybody was working from home, and fielding calls from council members and constituents about boards and commissions. So in a nutshell, it was a bit of a mess. So we decided to use our resources to create a solution. We worked with the South Carolina Association of Counties and also Code and Trust, which is a local software engineering firm based out of Mount Pleasant. And we created Matchboard. So it is a web app that local governments can use and embed directly into their website if they like, to manage their boards and commissions. So they can quickly review their applications, send reports to council members, and it makes it very easy for citizens to learn about the boards in their area and apply to serve. So we'll show you how Matchboard works and how it makes it easier than ever to get involved. It's currently being used by Beaufort County, Calhoun County, Marion County, McCormick County, Orangeburg County, City of Columbia, City of TKK, and City of Spartanburg. And Lexington County is in the process of joining Matchboard as well. So right now I'll turn things over to Christy Lindsay. She's the clerk for the City of Spartanburg, and one of her responsibilities is managing the city board. So she's going to pretend that she's not a clerk. She's going to pretend to be a citizen who is interested in applying to a board through Matchboard.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well this morning. Emily and Sarah, thank you so much for inviting me to share this program that we have absolutely been so excited about, because it, like Sarah was saying, it has made things so much easier. And it's also made things so much more transparent for our citizens who want to see what's available for the city of Spartanburg, and also for our council members. So let me show you this exciting site. Hang on one second. I'm going to share my screen with you guys.
Yeah, and Christy, I want to just touch on, I was speaking from the perspective of if you're applying for a board, the benefits of it, but
Yes.
we would love, just as you go through, like you said, this is also a value to the clerks, to council, like on the government side of things. It sort of streamlines a lot of processes, a lot of things that were manual then become automated, which keeps things from falling through the cracks and is, more productive and a better use of taxpayer dollars in terms of the time that you as a clerk or, other folks on the government side are spending as well.
Yes, absolutely. And as a citizen, it's like Emily was saying, you're not searching all these different websites or places or links to see what's available. You can go to one spot and find everything. So what you would, can everybody see my screen? I just want to make sure. Okay. All right, great. So this is the Matchboard website. And I want to, this is the homepage that the citizens would see. And I'm going to go over here and click boards. All right, so as you can see, it's going to bring up all the boards that are currently, or all the cities that are currently registered with Matchboard, and all their boards and commissions that are available. You can do several different searches on here, which I really like. You can come up here and search by the position that you're looking for. And you can also search by location. All right, so the other great thing you can do is, say I'm a citizen and I'm looking for something that I would like to serve on that deals with businesses. So you can go to the filter category, and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to check the business box. And this is going to bring up several boards that deal with businesses that I could apply for because I have that background. And you can see it's going to, right now it's pulling up all boards from everyone that is registered with Matchboard currently. And so you would want to narrow that down a little bit. So I'm going to uncheck business, and I'm going to go up here to the search location, and I'm going to type Spartanburg. Now my computer, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with my computer this morning too, so I apologize.
I think everything runs a little more slowly when Zoom is running, when you've got screen shares and video stream coming in. So no worries, it looks great.
Thanks. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do search. So I love this because you can see all the boards that the city currently has. And I'm going to go up here and take this out so y'all can see this. And right now it's going to list all of our boards that the city has. And I'm going to pick one so we can dive into it a little bit further. All right, let's do our Board of Historic Design and Review, or we call this the HARB for short. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it's going to bring up the board. It's going to bring up any positions that are available currently. It explains the term of years that you serve. And it also puts the enabling legislation on here as to where that board was created and outlines everything about that board. Now you can come down and say, say it's the beginning of the year and you're looking for something to serve on because you understand that, most boards are voted on July 1 or take effect July 1 because that's our fiscal year. And for instance, this one, the clerk is accepting applications April through June. So I want to go in and look to see, is this something that I would be eligible for? And on this, it gives you all the information that you would need to know. It gives you the purpose of the board. It gives you all the information about the membership, whether you need to be a city resident, or if you're not a city resident, what, do you have to have significant business interest in the city, or what needs to happen so that you can be eligible for that board. And then also you can come down here and it will tell you when they meet. It's like Sarah was saying earlier, some boards meet every month, some meet on call, some meet, every other month, things like that. So this will tell you that this one meets only if business is received for the board to meet and discuss at 5:30. And down here, it'll tell you all the different areas of interest or expertise. As me as a citizen, if I am listed in these different things that I'm interested in, then I think that would be a good board for me to apply for. Okay, so, and then also you can check our current seat members, which is really great because the ones, it'll tell you when their term ends. And so right now we have 4 positions that are available for this board that are coming up, and we have received applications for them. Let's see. All right, so let's say I want to apply for this board. This is the part that I absolutely love as a clerk. I'm going to step over to the clerk side for a moment. I absolutely love this part because it's quick, as it says, quick apply, and it comes straight to me. And then I can have communication with the citizen through Matchboard, which is great because that citizen is not worried about leaving me phone calls or playing phone tag, or, if their email system is kicking out spam, they may see something and think that the email spam. So this just avoids those pitfalls. So let's go down and do quick apply. Okay, it's going to bring up my login screen. Okay, so I'm a regular citizen. I've never logged into Matchboard before. So what I can do is just go down here to sign up here. And then I would just fill out information about me, my email address, and how to contact me. Super easy, super easy. So I do have an account, so let's log in. Okay, now I'm going to go back down to the board that I was interested in, which was the Historic Review Board, and I want to apply. So I'm going to click View Details, and then it'll bring it up over here. And then you guys can also see there's a Message Clerk button over here, which is awesome as a citizen applying. Just click that and say, hey, if you have another question that is not listed here that you want to find out from the clerk, then you just send this and it will come directly to the clerk's email. And they can respond with an answer. So let's quickly apply. Okay, so here, I think it was like the lady before me was speaking about, she was saying that some people don't know their council districts. They don't know who their council person is. So Matchboard has already thought about that. They've gone up here and there's a question mark. And if you hover over this, I'm going to show you really quickly what that does. If you click on it, it's going to take you to SC Votes. And you can go from here to find out who your council person is and exactly what district that you're in. And then you're going to fill out your council district, your race, your gender, boards that you want to serve on, and if there's a certain, you know, preference in a role or a district that you would like to be in. So let's go to the next one. I'm just going to type in, close this, and hang on 1 second, you guys. All right. Again, I'm sorry, we're having some computer stuff this morning. So I'm just going to type this in really quick so you can see what it's like when we apply for things on boards. Okay. Now, the other great thing is the individual can upload a cover letter and a resume. That way that council, if they are doing interviews, they can see everything about this individual, and you can provide additional information that maybe is not in your in the small, what am I saying? Apologize, you guys. So like there's another form that you can fill in like additional qualifications. So maybe you want to expand on that. So you can do that in a cover letter. So I'm just going to not upload one and just put, and you're going to click next. Super easy. My application has been submitted. Now, how can a citizen go in and check that application? You would log onto your account and you can go up here, make sure that, you know, you can check your profile, make sure you've got all your information in there. Once you go in and create your account, Matchboard will prompt you to go in and create your profile so that you can have your experience in there, your education, your resume, a picture if you would like, and all your contact information, including your LinkedIn account and social media. All right, let's go back to where we applied. Okay, the great thing is, says my applications. Matchboard tracks your application. So if you're interested in more than one board, you can go in to see what the status is. Again, you don't fall into the pitfall of playing phone tag with someone trying to figure out what's going on. So as you can see here, I've applied for several different boards, and it will tell you the status of each. So for the Planning Commission, I changed my mind, so I withdrew my application, and it highlights that information here. The Museum Board, you can see that currently my application is in consideration. And the Beautification Commission, you can see where the clerk has viewed it. So when you first send it in, it'll say applied right here. And then once it's been viewed or passed on to council for further review, then you will see where it's in consideration. So that's one of the great tools, is you can go on to see everything you've applied for. You don't have to keep up with a folder or a spreadsheet like Emily was saying. You can just simply click on your applications and it will show you everything you've applied for. The other great thing is this little bubble up here. If you click on this, it's going to allow you to speak with the clerk. So let's go down and do Smyrna. Okay, on here, it's timestamped, which is awesome because if you can be away, you don't have to sit here and wait on an alert. The system will send you an email if you get an alert or a message from the clerk. So you can log back in and see, you know, you have a question and it timestamps the date, and then the clerk is able to respond through the system. It's great, very easy and very seamless for a citizen to apply. And then on the council clerk side, it's very easy for us as well. You guys have any questions so far? I know I kind of flew through it, but it's a great program. We've been using it, and I have had so much positive feedback from everyone in our city and folks that do want to apply for boards. We have gone in and linked it on our main homepage. So once a citizen goes into boards and commissions on the city of Spartanburg and they want to see what's available, they click our link and it takes them directly to Matchboard. And then they can go in and see everything that's available and apply and even ask me questions. So for us, we have our boards and commissions are coming up. We have several seats that are coming up that need to be filled. And so coming up June 1st, I'll be presenting to council our open vacancies and the positions that, or the applications that we received so far, so that they can vote and make a decision on those. It has been so much easier using this program because it has not taken me weeks on end to compare spreadsheets and go back and forth between papers. It's all in the system. So from a citizen standpoint, super easy. From a clerk standpoint, streamless and very transparent on both ends.
Yeah. So we do have a question, and this is not specifically related to the Matchboard app, but about requirements for living in a particular municipality or county in order to be considered for boards. Christy, do you want to maybe speak to that?
Sure, absolutely. So each board and commission, they do have their bylaws, and some of our boards in the city do require a resident to be within the city limits. Some of them do not. So it would just depend on what council votes on as to what the requirements should be for that board. And also the board members would sit down. I know the lady that was speaking earlier said that they have like a rules and appointments board that would sit down and review or interview individuals that come in for certain board positions. We don't have that board in the city, but I know our council has asked before about changing certain things or certain qualifications for our boards. And of course, our council would have to consider that and then vote on it. So yes, some of our boards do require you to be a citizen in the city of Spartanburg. However, there is a caveat that if you have a significant business interest, for instance, like on our accommodations board or our hospitality tax board, you would not be required to be a city resident. If you had significant business interests, then you could be considered for that board.
Gotcha. Thank you. Very good. Well, are there any other questions that anyone wants to throw in the chat, or Emily, is there anything else that you would like to add? And maybe Emily, if you could speak to, we have some specific questions from the chat about if, where particular people live. They weren't on the list of folks that are using Matchboard now. So if your community is not using Matchboard, if this is something that you're interested in, if you can maybe just talk about, is it worth putting a profile in there if you're a citizen and your community is not using it? And then how can the ladies that are on this call, if they feel like this looks like a good tool and they're seeing that in their community, it's really hard to get information about boards and commissions, what can they do to help advocate for their community to adopt Matchboard?
Absolutely. So if your government does not use Matchboard, check out Women in Leadership's website. I'll put the link in the chat again. We have a database of almost every county and a number of cities. And if you want us to add your city, just shoot me an email and we will add it. And that includes the Matchboard databases. We also have that built into the website. So you can find the positions that are available in your county or city. We update it the first week of every month. So we try to keep it nice and fresh for you. And if your government isn't using Matchboard, please feel free to tell them about us. We appreciate that. But also if you are interested and maybe serving on the zoning board for Greenville County who doesn't use Matchboard, but you want to learn a little bit more, make sure you're qualified, check out Matchboard. You can look at the zoning boards that City of Spartanburg has and Beaufort have to see what their board does, the qualifications. We have areas of experience, interest, and expertise marked for every board, and it'll help you figure out if you're a good fit for that type of board before you apply to it in your government.
Excellent. Well, this was fantastic. I get excited every time I see Matchboard. I would love to see, most of the state using it so that everybody just knows that's where you go to look for it. That's where you go to apply. You don't have to hand write an application and carry it down and hope that it gets to the right person. Or you submit an application and you don't hear back. Like Christy said, this is a way that clerks are wearing lots of different hats and being pulled in 97 different directions. And this is a way to streamline all of that. So anything that you can use, that you can do to help us advocate. And Emily, do you want to speak to the cost of Matchboard? And I will say, we take this as part of our mission. And so we've set up, there is a fee structure, but it's set up so that it is really nominal in consideration of the budgets of the municipalities. So Emily, I'm going to really let you speak to that.
Absolutely. So we're a nonprofit and that extends to Matchboard. So we're not really trying to make money off of this. We're just trying to cover costs and create a service. So pricing is tiered based on population size. For the smallest governments, it's $1,200 a year. For the largest, it's $6,000 a year, which in comparison, Richland County has $1 billion budget. So $6,000 is, not asking quite very much. So we try to keep it as affordable as possible. And I know on our next panel, Mayor Rickman will be joining us from the city of Columbia, and they actually use Matchboard, so he could speak to it a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly if there are no other questions, y'all, I have bad news. I'm going to be a taskmaster. We got a little bit behind schedule because we had such good information from all of our presenters. So I'm going to keep us rolling right through the break. This was going to be our break time. If you need to take a break, please do what you need to do. We certainly understand. But I want to keep us on track because I'm certain that everyone has things backed up right after we are supposed to finish up that they need to get done. And I want to be respectful to our panelists as well and give everyone the opportunity to share what they have to talk about related to our material. So please excuse me. You can be mad at me. I'll take the hit on that, but I want to keep us rolling. So thank you so much, Christy and Emily, for the information about Matchboard. And this is, everything is exciting, but I'm really excited about this next portion of today. And this is going to be our panel discussions. So we've been so fortunate with all of our presenters and panelists to have all of these different perspectives on boards and commissions represented. And we are going to talk about the secret formula for being appointed. So we've talked all of this nitty gritty. So now we're going to get it straight from the horse's mouths. And that would be from Brandy Amadon, who's the mayor of the city of Travelers Rest. From Daniel Rickenman, who is the mayor of the city of Columbia, and from Shakise Newton, who is on Richland County Council. And so these are the folks that are looking at your applications and helping to make appointments from the government perspective. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. And let's launch right in and let's make this very informal. So please, among yourselves, just feel free to pipe in. And I'll keep the discussion flowing, based on your responses. But let's start out with what makes a candidate stand out to council members and mayors making appointments or, whatever the governing body is. When you see applications, what is it that brings those applications to the top of the pile?
I'm happy to go first, Sarah, if that's okay. Again,
Yes,
Brandy
please.
Amadon, mayor of Travelers Rest. We're a town of about 10,000, so on the smaller scale. But yeah, I think because we are smaller, if I see an application of someone that I don't know, it's weird. So I say that to say, probably one of your questions is how to stand out and what makes unique. Like, I am very accessible. Most of our council members are very accessible. So I love having a conversation with someone even before they filled out an application. If you're new to town or if you're excited about something, just reaching out and saying, hey, mayor, I'd really like to join. Maybe you don't know, come to some of the meetings. I think that's really helpful to see people face to face and know their personality. It is very heavy decision-making when you give someone some authority in this setting because they're making recommendations to council. And so you want someone that is going to make good decisions. So I think having that personal relationship up front is really nice. I also love it when someone is more generic isn't the best word, but cares about the whole. So if you're very passionate about one thing, that causes me to pause a little bit if I'm going to put you on a committee, because you need to care about lots of different things. So if you're very passionate about, I don't know, trash or recycling or something, that's great. But I want someone, if I'm putting you on the planning commission, that cares about the whole. And so just making sure that if you have some skills, that's great. I think we also look for professional variations. So we don't have like a lot of real estate people or, a lot of one particular group. And so I think some personal professional expertise is nice too, but mainly it's the relationship building what we're looking for.
Yeah,
I would add to it. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah.
I was going to ask you to go next. So you're right on target.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I always feel like when you're applying for anything, if it's a job and an appointment, putting in that call, showing your interest, making that connection is so important. You see today in so many different aspects, kids who apply for colleges, those kids who are going to the admissions office, calling and getting known that they have a true, sincere interest in doing that makes such a big difference. And I agree with Brandy, if you're focused just on one issue, that's not a good quality, because that issue has spider webs into multiple issues. If you're making a decision, you're big into, I don't know, biking, let's say, and you're only focused on creating more bike lanes, but you got to understand the effect that has in different neighborhoods and how that affects the community. How does that intersect with our greenway plan and others? And so traffic, et cetera. So working, really understanding the global issue of the community, but also think it's very important as you let people know your interest to let them know that you really want to be involved. You don't just want to get appointed, because we get a lot of applications from folks who really aren't interested in serving. They're interested in saying they're serving. And so a real sincere conversation about your interests goes a long, long way.
Keith, do you have anything that you'd like to add in looking at it from the county perspective and from a council member versus a mayoral perspective?
Sure. I guess a few things is whenever you're applying for anything, it always helps to understand the process. And so first, in Richland County, we have a rules and appointments committee. And so we interview absolutely everyone who applies. And so I don't know if I think about applications rising to the top of the stack per se. I mean, I guess we look at them and we may say this person is a good fit, but we know we're going to interview every human. So if for some reason you miss it on the front end, you can always come back and talk to us. But I do want to echo what they said about demonstrating your interest. And it's really something very simple. It is sending an email just saying, hey, to whoever is making the decision, hey, just want you to know I applied. In the event that you are asking to be reappointed to a board, it never helps to have the executive director or whoever the appropriate person is to reach out and say, hey, this person has done a really good job serving. So those are some ways to stand out. And I certainly do agree about looking for people who have broad interests, but I guess I don't want people to be discouraged, because sometimes the board is really, really specific. And so if we need a plumber for the, I have no idea, but we do have a board where it requires plumbers. If we need some, really technical expertise because it's required for the board, then, you're not necessarily going to get dinged because you don't have this broad outlook on the entire community, because what we really do need is their subject matter expertise. So I guess I want to encourage everyone who is interested in the community, and I think that certainly makes you stand out. I just think that so many women find ways to disqualify themselves for applying for things that I would hate to add some other thing that you feel like you need to check 55 boxes before you can apply. So I don't think that my colleagues meant that. I just know that sometimes it's easy for people to think, oh my gosh, I don't need all these things. No, apply and learn from it. So that's what I'd say.
So not talking about politics like Republican and Democrat, but can you talk a little bit? I mean, you've talked about networking and how important it is to know the board that you're applying for, reach out and communicate to some of the decision makers, to the people that represent your district. But can you tell us the time when you saw, and I'm like little p politics, I don't know if we should say little p politics, come into play during the appointment process? And again, I think that we want to, sort of dispel some notions or not give people more reasons not to apply, but just how to navigate that. If you don't feel like you're a person who is already super well connected among council, does that work in your favor or against you? It sounds like Richland County has a process that's very equitable about talking to everyone and evaluating them all on their particular qualifications. But what have you seen that look like in the past?
Yeah, I'll go first again, if that's fine. I think for us, it's probably less about maybe a political piece, but more about the pool that we're choosing from. And so for me, I would love a big pool so we can be more nitpicky. So for us, some of the issues we've had in the past is maybe having a smaller pool. So for example, the election commission. We have our own board. The county definitely runs the show for elections, but we have a travelers rest board of 3 that is more of the overseers, just to make sure they come once a year. It's a very minimal work that they have to put in, but it's so important. So that is something that scares people, because elections like, oh, that's too much pressure. Like you mentioned, like, oh, I'm not qualified for that. I actually just need you to be a good person, be honest, be transparent, be friendly. And so those are some of the things of like, I wish people understood the value of the board, so I would have more to choose from. For us in Travelers Rest, we've also tried to make it more equitable. When I first came onto council years ago, it was a little bit of like, hey, Bob, Bob's not a real person. Hey, Bob, who do you think should be on this board? I don't know, Barbara, who do you think? It was a little bit more of that. And so now we're a little bit more official. There's an application process, and then we look at them together collectively as a whole council. So I think that's really helpful for us to be fair. It's not, you know, somebody's cousin that you're putting on. It's like, oh, we have this group of people. And that's where it comes really helpful, Sarah, for you to be like, oh, I know so-and-so, they're a great person, they're a teacher, you know, whatever, they can kind of give more of the personal input to that is really helpful. So for me, I love to have more applicants to choose from. And 9 times out of 10, it's not no, but it's no for this committee, but I'd love to have you to serve on the BZA or something like that. So I think just having more people to choose from is really, really helpful for us as decision makers.
I'll go. So I've never seen politics with either capitalization or uncapitalization play a role in our board appointments. But I do think, and maybe I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, going back to what Daniel and Brandy were saying, we're more looking for an open mind. And so what I find will disqualify you, for example, is, say, for example, for the Planning Commission, sometimes we have people apply because they were really, really mad about a zoning issue in their neighborhood. And we want you to be passionate about your neighborhood, and we want you to understand the effects of zoning on your neighborhood. But if it seems like you have an agenda, and that your agenda may be like in contrast to what the rules say, then that is something that would disqualify you. So it's fine to be passionate and to care, but if you come in and you seem like, no, this is what I think, and I'm gonna be guns blazing, and I don't care what the rules say, then that is something that would disqualify you. And so I'm not saying don't have integrity, but I'm saying we all have rules that we have to follow. And so we're looking for people who are going to be open-minded in that regard.
Yeah, I would add to it. I agree. Having a larger pool takes the politics out of it. I have to be very honest, because it used to be that way. We get a handful of applicants. Nobody knew. It was almost like people handpicked who they wanted to have on the board ahead of time. And I'm putting a shameless plug in for you, Barbara. Matchboard has created more opportunities for us to get larger pools, and people actually are engaging on it. And so the more that we can do that, we need to get more citizens engaged. Look, we're a community of close to 150,000 people, and we used to get 1 or 2 applicants for jobs or appointments. And so when you looked at that, and it usually was somebody steered them to there because it was a handwritten deal, and you could look to see who recommended them. Now you look and we're getting a variety of folks from a cross section of our community, which is what is important for us to move forward. Because if we don't have people from all corners of our community at the table, we're not going to move forward. It's just going to be the same thing. And so I would just push out there again to everybody. It's so important to get on board. If your community's not on board, this really opens up the door. It makes it easy for people to get on. It's easy for them to engage, and it really brings out the best in your community.
Yeah, and so you all have sort of touched on that idea of having diversity of perspectives on your boards. What can people do on their applications, or I guess maybe twofold, you know, what can you do to show that you have those perspectives? And that's whether it's your background, your occupation, you know, the experiences that you've had personally and professionally. So how can you kind of weave that into the application process? And then on the other side of that, what kind of questions in the evaluation process, or, you know, what is in place in each of your governments to ensure that there is that diversity of perspectives represented on your boards and commissions?
Well, I would tell you, you know, I think when you're applying for a position, sometimes more information is better, because I like to see what you've been involved in, what your experiences are. And then when you reach out, that's kind of the questions that I ask folks is, well, you know, what's your interest? What have you been involved in? Where are your passions? Learn a little bit about them, how that intersects, but make sure that they have a, you know, as Shakis mentioned earlier, you don't want somebody who's single focused on one issue. I mean, we've had many people who wanted to run because they lost a zoning matter in their community. and they want to stop everything from happening anywhere else, but not understanding, that those are isolated incidents. That's not all the way around. So I do think, really understanding, what your involvement has been, what your passions are, how you understand the process too. Have you done your homework? I think that was mentioned earlier as well, understanding that homework is so important for that.
I was laughing, Sarah, because when you were talking, it sounded a little bit like a dating website. Like, do you like long walks on the beach type thing? So yes, we do want to know that information. I think, what is the saying about people don't care how much you know until you show how much you care, something along those lines. And so I think what I'm looking for first is, tell me why you want this. Like you had mentioned, not for some one particular thing that you're maybe super passionate or against, but tell me why you want to serve the whole city. And then I think it's helpful just to give all those dating things, where you're from, what you like to do in your spare time, also professional, resume. I think those are all very helpful things. But for us, we're looking for a holistic group of people. So for example, on a planning commission, I want people who have lived in Travelers Rest forever. I want people who have maybe been here the last couple of years. I want people who are young and old. Just make sure we have a nice, diverse group, because we are answering very hard questions about growth. Everybody wants to live in the South. I get it. I'm from here. It's awesome. I see why you from Ohio want to move down here. Come on down. But we're trying to figure out like how to make those good decisions from a policy standpoint to keep all the good things that we have here. And so having a really nice, broad breadth of experience. I would love someone young. I would love someone who's more in their 70s, just to make sure we're representing age population. So all that to say, I think giving, like you had mentioned, Daniel, more of the holistic part, like not just a resume of like, this is where I went to school, but more of what you care about, I think is really helpful too. And, family background too, just so we know that you've planted roots and that you feel invested in the community, I think is really important too.
If I would love to underscore some of the things that Brandy and Daniel just said, because I think that they're so important. So maybe 3 times will be the charm in this case. So I cannot stress enough the importance of doing your homework. And whoever, I think it was the clerk from Travelers Rest, or maybe it was Emily, somebody said, if you don't have enough information here, go look at the other board applications. But sometimes I wonder if applicants feel like they cannot ask questions, because it never ceases to amaze me how many times people show up and actually have no idea what the board does. In fact, just this Tuesday, there were 3 applicants who were applying for the Columbia Community Relations Council. And they asked, well, why are you applying? And their answers were, well, we want to be able to give more feedback to county council and blah, blah, blah. And so the council members were like, what do you think this board does? And it was just clear they thought something else. I mean, I've been in a 10-minute interview interviewing somebody for the board at the airport, when suddenly they said something that made me understand, you think you're applying for the Columbia Metropolitan Airport. We are appointing people to the Owensfield Airport. And so please, ask questions, do some research, understand what the board does. And then to Daniel's point, I mean, I think you're applying for something, treat it like a job interview. I think for me, it's helpful to understand, what is your secret sauce, or whatever you want to call it? What is the thing that you offer that is going to make this board better? And then finally, I just put in a plug to tell your friends to apply, because the pool really does matter. I mean, we want to appoint great people to these boards, and sometimes we don't have the applicants who know or who we can appoint. And I can't speak for the other areas, but in Richland County, there are many times where we really want to appoint somebody, but we will just move to re-advertise because we don't have enough people there. So if you can come and you can show, I understand what this board does, or I have a basic picture, we're always going to ask people, have you been to a board meeting? And in today's Zoom age, even if you cannot have attended in person, you maybe can look at an old meeting online. Do you know who serves on the board? Those kinds of things are important. And I guess I would be remiss if I said, I don't think you guys would do this, but in your reaching out, you want to be friendly and assertive, but not aggressive. And so every now and then, on our Richland County application, and they really need to change this line. It says something like council member who referred you. And that's just if we referred you, but strangers will call me and be like, will you refer me for this board? And I'm like, no, because I don't know you, but I'm happy to talk to you, but I'm not going to endorse you. And I don't know your name, but I think really understanding, doing your homework about the board, not feeling afraid to call the clerk or whoever you need to call, or not limiting yourself to the county website. Go look at the organization website, treat it like an interview. And now I'm going to be quiet and skip the next question.
We don't want anyone to skip any questions, so don't apologize for sharing your insight. That's what you're here for. So you've applied and then you don't hear anything back. And I know this is never going to happen in Columbia because they're using Matchboard and there are all these communication systems built in.
It
But
won't
let's
happen in
say-
Richland County.
how do you proceed? Like, what's a good way to follow up if, and whether it's, I mean, I think that there's different stages in that process, right? Like you submit an application, maybe you're not to the interview stage yet. I think obviously just like a job application, you want to make sure that it's received. So what's the best way to do that without people feeling like you're being a pest and like sort of, throwing up a flag on your application, like, oh, wow, this person's going to be great to work with. They're wearing us out.
I would tell you, obviously first check with the clerk, and say, hey, what's going on with the process? Because sometimes there's delays with scheduling and so forth, but if they didn't get some type of notification, they definitely should ask. And I don't take it the wrong way when people call, even if they call my office and say, hey, I put an application, I haven't heard anything. For one, it goes back to showing your interest, that you really care and that you want to be considered and that you're taking the honest time you're not just filling it out to fill it out and say, I applied and I just want to be appointed. And so it kind of goes back and forth. I think nobody should ever be, worried about picking up the phone and calling. I would always start with the clerk because that's where, all our applications land. And then from there, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, I didn't hear anything back. Are y'all planning on voting? Did y'all defer it for some reason? Most people who are paying attention and are really interested, they even show up to the council meetings. They're listening a little bit to see how the process works and goes on. But I would never apologize by asking the question. To me, that just shows continued interest.
I agree. The only thing I would add to that is I think we of course have process, but I think there's an assumption that we all know what's going on as politicians. We all have day jobs, we have families. And so there is a nice to be like, Sarah just texted me. Oh, that's right. I do need to think about this committee. So it is helpful just to be reminded that someone cares and they're watching. And I think that's good for us. Our clerk, again, that's like your frontline person, but also they have a million things going on as well. And so again, you will not bother us by reaching out. If you do it 3 times in one day, maybe that might be a little much, but once a week is welcome.
And I'll say, okay, yes. And I think the better part of Valor is to ask about the process when you apply. So for example, at Richland County, we have interview schedules. We're appointing so many boards. And at one point there was a backlog so long, they were having like 4-hour meetings to interview people. And so for us, for example, it just takes a long time. So if you say, hey, what's the process? Our clerk will say, well, we think that we're going to start interviewing for this position on X date. And so when you know that, it helps you to target your follow-up more specifically, because at least in Richland County, it's very methodical. The Rules and Appointments Committee meets on the same date every month. We can only do X amount of interviews per day. If 10 people apply for one board, we try to group those people all together so it stays fresh in people's minds. So just by asking up front, sometimes you can save yourself a lot of headache at the end.
So let's say you have applied, you go through the process, you are not appointed, but you are determined that you want to serve. What are some things that you can be doing to get yourself ready to reapply? Like, how can you demonstrate that you are showing up in the community, that you're interested in, making the community a better place, that you are not just someone who is disgruntled because they did something with your mailbox in your neighborhood that you didn't like, and, that you really have the bigger picture in mind. and that you're invested in, like Brandy is saying, do you have roots in the community? What are some things that you can do to get yourself ready to reapply and give it a second go, or a third go for that matter?
I would say that, continuing to stay involved, don't disappear. Show interest in meetings, especially when we have public meetings on anything, including budgets or whatever. Just show your interest, stay involved in your community and show that. A lot of times we get people who will apply for something and then they just disappear, and just because you didn't get that position doesn't mean that there are other boards and commissions that open up, or, you never know, somebody may have to retire off the planning commission because suddenly their spouse got relocated and they're outside the city limits or whatever. I mean, things happen like that all the time, but staying involved, and we've seen too many people will disappear. I'll even throw in people who run for office. I mean, there's some folks that didn't get elected that probably should get elected in the future that have great passion, but they just disappear. And so they're no longer involved. And I think the more you can stay involved in your community, the more interest, the more opportunities will open up for you to stay involved. I think it's as simple as that, honestly. I have to give a shout out to my Kelly Glenn real quick from Village Idiot Pizza on there, y'all. She runs a great business in our community, but she is franchising across the Southeast. So excited to have another woman-owned business growing.
You can't talk about pizza right before lunch, Daniel.
I know.
I took everyone's break away. Now he's talking about pizza.
It is good pizza though.
I mean, I was just going to say, yeah, don't disappear. Like, don't take it personally. People drop off for health reasons, like Daniel said, moving, and just keep coming back just to remind us like, oh, she's here, he's here, because something will pop up. We will use you, but don't leave us. Even if you can't come to a meeting, you watch it on YouTube, send us a message. Hey, saw you guys, just to stay connected. I think is really great.
And just, again, don't take it personally. I mean, sometimes board appointments is really math. 10 people applied for one slot. So 90% of the people were going to be disappointed with our decision because of math. And so some boards have one opening in our case, and you must have this specific expertise. And so you can be the most fantastic teacher, home builder, entrepreneur, whatever. But again, we needed a plumber, and we're just really sorry that you couldn't be that person. So I would just encourage people to continue to apply. And if it is appropriate, because it isn't always, and if you have connections, you can try to find out maybe, is there anything that would have made me a more appealing candidate for this board? And again, I couch that carefully because your council members aren't necessarily going to know. I don't serve on the Rules and Appointments Board anymore, so I accept the recommendations of the committee as they come to me. But I have called to inquire about a constituent of mine who was interested in the board to say, hey, really curious to know why this person didn't get it. Might want to suggest them to apply again. What information can you give me, council member to council member, on what would have made them a more appealing candidate for you?
Excellent. Y'all, thank you so much for your insights. I want to encourage, if anyone has any questions, to please go ahead and drop them in the chat. We've gotten ourselves back on track time-wise, but we still have a couple minutes for questions. And I will say, we had a question about how to approach the governor with recommendations. I'm going to table that one because we have a representative from the governor's office who's going to be with us for our last panel discussion. So I think that that's probably better addressed there. But this has been a hugely informative. Thank you for your perspectives, kind of that flip side of the coin from, looking at what does the, what's really important to the applicant, but what are you considering when you're looking at it from the governmental perspective? And again, we have to give a shout out to the City of Columbia for their adoption of Matchboard. They helped us build the program. They were one of our beta testers, and we're so excited. Emily, do you want to, and I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have any stats that you might want to share about the City of Columbia and Matchboard? And you can just like smack me if I'm asking you a question that you weren't prepared to answer, and maybe the mayor knows as well.
I will say, I think the first month they joined, they got 50 applications, which was pretty impressive. So yeah, Columbia's been a great success story for us.
Yeah, but again, I mean, everything that everyone has echoed here today is that they really want you to apply. Like they want to find a way for you to serve. They want to find ways for citizens to be engaged. They want to find ways for diverse, and that, is maybe race, gender, abilities, backgrounds. I loved, and Brandy, I hadn't really thought about it, but like the perspectives of people who are newer to the community versus someone who is born in Travelers Rest and has lived there. All of that's important for our communities to be able to move forward and be the kind of places that we want to continue to live and grow and raise our children and all of those things. So thank you so much for your perspectives. Is there anything that any of you would like to add that we didn't cover from any of our panelists? Well, we really appreciate you making time on your Saturday morning. And thank you again for all that you do to serve our communities and office. We really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Okay, so I think I have us back on track, which is exciting. Sorry we had to sacrifice the break. I appreciate you being understanding about that. So our next panel is about how to become a more effective board member. So whether you're currently serving or whether you're seeking an appointment and you really just want to prepare yourself to do a great job and really make a difference once you get in there, our next group of panelists are all board members serving on various different types of boards across our state. We have Aisha Grant Taylor, who is on the Workers' Compensation Commission, Kelly Glenn, who is on the City of Columbia Hospitality Committee. You'll hear that referred to as HTAX a lot. We use acronyms sometimes, and so I like to try to qualify those right from the beginning. And then Ashley Wilkerson, who's on the Winthrop Board of Trustees. So a really wide range. And some of those positions are full-time jobs, as in Aisha's case. Others are volunteer positions. Obviously it's education versus, city tax allocation. So I'm going to just kick us right off. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here today. And maybe a good place to start is to just talk, if each of you want to go around and just talk about what are some of the responsibilities of the board that you serve on. What do you oversee? Are you a full-time person? Are you a part-time volunteer? Just kind of what that looks like. Aisha, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you again for inviting me to this board or this panel discussion. This is excellent. So the Workers' Compensation Commission, we serve as the sole agency that governs all of the workers' compensation cases, claims, insurance premiums over the whole state. There are 7 of us, and we are responsible for the whole state. It's actually a dual role. So we have a judicial role. We're actually judges. And then the second role is the administration. So it is a full-time job, but it's really like 2 full-time jobs in one. I think as a state employee, we're supposed to work 37.5 hours a week. And I probably work 60 to 65 just because there's a lot of work to be done amongst 7 people. I always tell people Virginia is slightly bigger than South Carolina. However, Virginia's Workers' Comp Commission has 260 employees. We have 47. So we are responsible for essentially what other states allocate 5 times the amount of employees to. So we do a lot of work, but it's important work. Of course, the judicial portion, we do govern. We have hearings where we have disputed matters between injured workers and their employers. And then, of course, as the agency portion, we govern insurance premiums, claim notices, just procedures for insurance carriers to follow, reporting that they do have insurance. But it is definitely a full-time job, but it's important and enjoyable work.
And Aisha, can you just really quickly to add to that, what was your appointment process? You mentioned it is a more than full-time job for you. So who appointed you? And I mean, just briefly, what did that look like?
Sure. So I was initially appointed by then Governor Nikki Haley. The way it worked, I was a workers' comp defense attorney. So I was at Collins and Lacey. I was a partner there doing defense work, representing employers and their insurance carriers. And then there was a commissioner who was going to retire early, not really retire. He was just going back into private practice. And so there was kind of like an interest meeting. He actually kind of organized the meeting just to see who would be candidates. He didn't want to leave the commission high and dry, so he went ahead and tried to forward over some names. So there was a group of us who met. Those names were forwarded. There was an interview process, which included various injured workers groups, business groups, and then, of course, Governor Haley herself. And then I was selected for the position. So it was probably altogether about a 3-month process. It was very short. I do know for some others, it's a longer process because they kind of monitor it and apply ahead of time. There is a process where if you wanted to become a workers' comp commissioner, you kind of just follow our terms. We're appointed in 6-year terms. And so when an opening is coming up, usually people will send in letters to the governor's office expressing interest.
Thank you. Ashley, would you like to talk a little bit about your role and what you oversee in your appointment process?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ashley V. Wilkerson. I'm a 10-year trustee for Winthrop University. And I was the youngest person appointed to that role at the age of 29. I just turned 40. And so in this 10-year period, and every state institution in South Carolina goes through the same process. So for those of you who are interested in serving our higher education institutions, you are more than welcome to apply for the position. And so the way that looks, to the first question that you asked, Sarah, what is our governing structure? And so we have it is a volunteer capacity. We are not paid to serve on university and college boards of trustees. And then our position is threefold. And so the first most important aspect of the job is to hire, and if we have to, fire the president. And so selecting the leadership for the university is the main focus of our position. The second is then setting the vision and the agenda and the mission for the university collectively that we then charge the president to carry out on a day-to-day basis in his role of president alongside his leadership cabinet. And then the third is to be actively engaged in the campus environment. And so we strive to be present, be visible, and be interactive with campus and allow our campus constituents to know who we are in that capacity. To get on the board, there are 3 different ways that you would get on a university board in the state of South Carolina that is a public institution. Now, the private colleges in the state, they have their own process, and you may want to be in contact with their trustees and or their president to learn more about the process for each of those individual private institutions in the state of South Carolina. But for the public institutions, there are 3 ways that you would seek to be appointed to those seats. The first way you can go about it is to hold a seat that represents the alumni. So if you are an alumnus of that particular institution, you would then go to your alumni association, you would express interest. Your alumni association has a ballot, and they will have a voting and election process in which they will select, usually it's 2 representatives from the alumni. At Winthrop, it's 2 representatives that represent the alumni constituency group. And so they are elected among the alumni of Winthrop University. The second seat that you can occupy is an appointed seat. The governor has 2 appointed seats on the board, and the superintendent has 1 appointed seat on the board. So you can be appointed by the governor and or the superintendent to the higher ed boards in the state of South Carolina. The third way is the way that I gained my seat, and that way was through the General Assembly. Now that process is far different from the first 2, and it's far more involved. And so it takes about 5 to 6 months to go through that process. And so what that process looks like is once the State House make public notice that there are seats available on a university board, you would request an application from the from the senator's office who is over the process at that time. And so at the time, I believe it was Senator Peeler's office who I contacted, and I received the official application from his office, and his staff liaison was responsible for receiving. Now, I tell people this process, when I say involved, I want to put extra emphasis on the word involved, because what they require from you in your application process is a comprehensive background check. And so they don't only look at your background in the sake of whether or not you have a criminal history. That is a part of it, but they also look at your driving record. They look at your finances. They do an extensive check on who you are in your background, because you're going to be entrusted with the state resources, funding, and the management of a state institution. So they want to completely vet you, and they will go through your full background after you submit that application, and they go through your background. They will let you know if you've been approved to go to screening. So once you've made it through there, you will go through screening, and during the screening process, you will go before a joint committee of representatives and senators, and they will then ask you questions. Okay, and so they may ask you about those speeding tickets. They may ask you if you had a lapse of insurance. They may ask you if your debt to income ratio isn't preferred. They're going to ask you questions about if you had something that showed up that may have been questionable, however, could have been explainable. Usually, if you've made it to that process, you're in the clear. You're usually pretty good, unless they have something that's questionable and then your response is not favorable. So that screening process is you're supposed to take that screening process extremely seriously, because everyone doesn't make it through that process. Once you've made it through that process, they will say, okay, you can do informal campaigning. During the informal campaigning process, that's when you then introduce yourself to as many legislators in both the House and the Senate as possible. And during that introductory process, you're simply supposed to let them know who you are, what you're running for, and why you think you're suited for that seat or that position. You are not cleared to ask them to vote for you or to give you their support. And I want to make sure I stress that, because you can get disqualified completely from the process if you do not use the appropriate vocabulary and terminology during that period of time. Once that period of time is done, they will then say you have been cleared to ask for commitments and or votes. During that time, you want to ask everyone, do I have your commitment? And you want to continue to keep a running record of your commitments that you have gained, because that will then show up on election day. Election day, the General Assembly will come together in the House. That's when the Senate will come into the House chambers, and then you will come up for your seat, and then collectively they will vote on you. And then that concludes the process. So it is a 5 to 6 month process from the time that you express interest to the time that the election takes place. And then each university differs from the number of people that goes for each process, whether it's alumni, whether it's appointments, or whether it's General Assembly. Each composition for each state's board differs in that regard. And therefore, the way you are appointed for the General Assembly also differs. And I will conclude by saying for Winthrop University, our General Assembly is seated by two ways. We have at-large seats, and so they are selected to represent the entire state of South Carolina, but then we have congressional seats. I represent Congressman Clyburn's congressional district on Winthrop University's board. So each congressman has their own seat where they have someone that represents them on Winthrop's board for that seat. Again, that varies per higher ed institutional board. I hope that is a comprehensive response for you.
Yeah,
Sarah.
extremely comprehensive. Thank you. And I definitely want to turn to Kelly and have her share her background and the same information. But Ashley, and I saw Aisha nodding. You said, being very careful about the language that you use during different parts of the process. Is that well spelled out once you get into the process in terms of what's allowable during each portion of the process, or was that something that you had to suss out yourself?
I would say both. I'm not sure about Aisha, but I would say both. They do give you a really thick packet, and it would behoove you to make sure you read in detail and in entirety the packet. However, what the language that I used was, I would like for you to consider me, and at the appropriate time, I will be back in touch with you. And so using language such as at the appropriate time is one way to make it clear that you're not asking for anything right now. Also, if you refrain from using vote or commitment and just say, hi, this is a touch point where I wanted to introduce myself to you and answer any questions that you may have of me as I seek to be appointed to the Winthrop University Board of Trustees. And so I had to make sure I wasn't, because you can be intimidated by that process too, by the way. It can be very intimidating, and sometimes it's just natural to say certain things, but you had to keep that in mind because some people did say, hey, can I have your commitment? And then they were removed from the process completely.
Kelly, thank you for your patience. So tell us, obviously City of Columbia and hospitality tax is very different than having a full-time appointment like Aisha, or having to go through everything with the legislature. So tell us about your experience with this sort of more local, but really important, opportunity about, deciding how hospitality tax dollars are spent in the City of Columbia.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, wow, what an honor to follow two very dynamic women. But I sit on the Hospitality Tax Advisory Committee. So we are a volunteer committee that advises the City of Columbia's council on our recommendation on how a certain number of the overall collected hospitality tax dollars should be spent in our communities. Arts groups, events, things that bring people back into the city to continue to replenish that pot of dollars that help our City of Columbia community. It's an application process, and it's appointed by City Council. There's a 12-member committee. Several of the seats are allocated for restaurant owners, since we are the ones that are contributing to this pot of money by people coming into our establishments. So for me, finding this committee that I am, contributing to, it's very important for us to continue the growth within the city with these arts organizations, events, nonprofits that are bringing people back into the city. So it's very important that for me to sit on this committee.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I really want to dig in. We have such a diverse perspective from the three of you that, we're talking about how to be a more effective board member. And so one of the questions, and I'm trying to decide, I've got like three, and I feel like, well, they all kind of go together. So maybe I'll just kind of lump them together, and then I'll let you guys run with them. So how have you built relationships with your other council members, with officials, with board members, so that you can be more effective, to increase your, status on the board, to increase your value to the community, starting out. And then I think sort of hand in hand with that is like diversity. And how has a diversity or lack of diversity on the board that you're on affected your status, your value, your ability to forge relationships? How have you overcome that, if you ever felt like that was an issue? And Aisha, we can go back to you if you'd like to.
Sure. I'll pick up with the second part of the question on diversity. So right now, I'm the only Black person on the Workers' Comp Commission, and historically, there's always just one. I'm not going to get into why that is, but it just is what it is. But I will say it's important, and I would push, I guess probably when I get closer to leaving, one of my things I want to take on when the kids get a little bit older is to just push that there should at least be two. 33% of our workforce in South Carolina are Black or other designated minorities. So I think they need more representation on the commission. It's just a matter of statistics. But I will say my colleagues do, I wouldn't say defer, but they do value my opinion. So my opinion is very valued at the Workers' Compensation Commission. I'm also probably one of the youngest appointees. I don't think I'm the youngest, but maybe the second or third youngest. And a lot of my colleagues are in their 60s. So for a variety of reasons, they do value my opinion. I'm younger. I have younger children. I'm just kind of I have a better understanding of what's going on out there. A lot of them are closer to retirement. And so, just for I'll give this as an example. When we go to hearings, we have to travel the whole state. So we get assigned to a different district every 2 months. So right now I'm down in Charleston, the Charleston district. And so a lot of times when you walk in and you have a hearing and you have an injured worker who didn't feel like they were understood, when they walk in and they see a Black judge as their hearing commissioner, they have a level of comfort. And it's just hard to imagine that 33% of our workforce sometimes don't get that if I'm not in that particular district. And so it is important to me, but I do feel like as a commission, it is important as well. And I know the governor's office has some requirements that they'd like for our agency, or all state agencies, to meet with regard to diversity and things like that. So we always meet our goals every single year. We make that a top priority. With regard to actually getting along with the other commissioners, because we're so isolated, we're in 7 different places throughout the month, but we do have a monthly business meeting where we do our judicial conference. So we all sit together at a conference room table for about 2.5 hours, handle that business, and then we go out into our public meeting. And then we all make a point to go to lunch together afterwards, just to kind of stay in touch and make sure we're all kind of on the same page with most things. Then some of us have closer relationships than others. And so some of us talk on the phone every time we're on the road driving here or there. So we get to catch up with one another. But that kind of camaraderie is important, especially when there are disagreements, because you learn how to not take things personal just because someone doesn't agree with you. If you have a good relationship with them. So we do work towards that. We have a chairman. So there are 7 commissioners, one of whom is also the chairman of the commission. And his saying is making sure we're all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction. So we all try to do that.
And Aisha, you are one of 2 or 3 women on the commission?
Let's see. Yeah, one of 3. There are 3. Yep.
Gotcha. So a couple of different things there that are not really the right balance of representation. So Kelly, I would love to hear, I feel certain that there are probably some passionate feelings about way that money should be allocated, and talk a little bit about your relationships and how, when you do have disagreements about who should get what have you found to be effective? And like Aisha said, how have you fostered relationships or, tried to build that kind of rapport so that everyone can make decisions on a professional level and not make it personal?
So our committee is a very short term. We're appointed for a 2-year term, and we only meet once a year for 3 days, where we are reviewing the applications, we're getting presentations from the organizations, and then we get to spend several hours giving people money. So for the most part, everyone we're in a good place because we have been, given these dollars to recommend allocation. A lot of people in the room are restaurateurs that have the same goal in mind. Several from the arts community. So it really is, there's not much contention to the allocation of these dollars. The only time that we really have some issues is when an organization comes in front of us that just does not qualify for this particular pot of money. That's where the discussion comes in, and we really just weigh each other's opinions and make the best decision on the parameters and guidelines we've already set. So it's a pretty, we don't get to see each other very often. It's just 3 times a year in that room, in that setting. So our biggest goal is to get to know the organizations throughout the year as much as we can. Go to these events, go to the operas, go to the ballets, so that when they come back in front of us, we can really see how they're making an impact in the community, and not just them kind of, giving that 15-minute presentation to us. So, and we're pretty all collective in that thought process.
Yeah, and Kelly, I would love to hear a little bit about the composition of the board in terms of diversity and a representation from women as well.
There are 3 women currently. We do have 1 rolling off.
How many total on the board?
There's 12
Not
of us.
women, but how many?
Yeah, there's 12 total. We do have 3 women. We have 1 Black person right now. He's in the restaurant business as well. 6 of our appointments are restaurateurs. So
yeah, and then the other appointments would be hotels and.
Say that again.
What's the representation from, I suppose, lodging, like hotels? What are the other kind of folks that are on the board other than restaurateurs?
So we are, because we're the hospitality tax, we do not have much representation.
Not accommodations. Thank you for correcting me.
It's mostly the arts community and the restaurants community, because we're collecting it and they're wanting to get that funding. So there is representation from several arts community, experts, if you will. We've got an accountant, bookkeeper, accountant, because, someone's got to make sure that we're following these dollar guidelines. But the most of the representation is restaurateurs.
Gotcha. Well, and again, I think that speaks to the opportunity for people with lots of different backgrounds to be involved. And I think that was echoed even when we talked about the nonprofit board sector, is that there are different roles to fill on both public and private boards. And so, don't think that, you may have a skill that is important and is something that needs to be represented regardless of what that board is. So Ashley, tell me about building relationships. People have gone through this like extensive process to get appointed. How do you build relationships with each other? How have you felt like, your diversity was represented in your role?
So for Winthrop's Board of Trustees, there are 15 trustees. We, depending on how you get appointed, we have up to 6-year terms at a time. For the past 10 years, I've been the only woman of color on the board. Right now, in the composition is 1 African-American woman, 3 African-American men, 3 European-American women, and the rest European-American men. We do, however, have the most diverse board for higher education in the state of South Carolina. So that's the ethnicity, racial diversity, but I think diversity of thought and experience is extremely important when you factor it in to the conversation. When I first joined the board at the age of 29, my counterparts were all 60, 55 to 75 years old. And so I had to navigate a lot over the past 10 years, being the youngest, and the intersectionality of being the only African-American woman, being the youngest, and being just overall youthful in my appearance. For those of you who don't know me, I stand 4 feet 9.5. And any given day, I may look like I am one of the college students. And so that's the intersectionality of how you're then perceived and received when you're at a decision-making table. So some people did not like having an answer to a young Black woman who looks like she's a teenager. And then some people were very receptive to that. And so, that's been a part of my dynamic. But now Whereas in the beginning, you know, it may not have been received my responses or my feedback. Now it has turned into, well, what does Dr. Ashley or Dr. Wilkerson have to say? You know, we need to get her input because I have shown through that 10-year that I bring a voice that would not otherwise be there. I advocate for a group of people who wouldn't otherwise have people representing them at the table. And I bring a viewpoint that is more in touch with the students that are at the school at this time in comparison to quite a few of my counterparts who may have been removed from that setting in 20, 30, 40 years, right? And so when you're making decisions, and even now, I feel old. When we have students who say they graduated in, I don't know, when they say they graduated in 2015, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I graduated in 2005. But when you're making decisions for a population of people who are trusting trustees to conduct and operate a university for their betterment and for their growth, you want to have voices around the table who have been in where they are now within at least a shorter period of time than 30 to 40 years. And so oftentimes I would bring a perspective that they no longer had. You know, just case in point, if they're asking, you know, well, why isn't our alumni giving as high as it should be? Why are our students graduating and not giving back to the university? And I would have to remind them, a lot of our graduates don't have the job that you have now in where you're giving back. A lot of our graduates have graduated with a service degree such as social work or education. They are paying back student loans. They are trying to earn advanced degrees and oftentimes paying that out of pocket. And they're trying to raise a growing family. And so they have far more to contend with, and we need to give consideration for where they are now in the way in which they may be able to give. Are we challenging ourselves to think of ways that we can further engage them that's not asking them to give $1,000 when they feel like they're still paying for the degree? They're not going to give money to the institution at the same time. And so that was an aha moment for some of my counterparts because they didn't think about those types of things. And so in bringing that viewpoint, sometimes it's, you know, it's valued to give that to them. The second aspect of your question is, how do we foster those relationships with each other? And so what we do, because it's 15 of us and we are all over the state of South Carolina, you know, some people are in Florence, some people are in Hilton Head, some people are in Charleston, some people are in Columbia, some people are right there in Rock Hill. We're all over. So therefore, we sometimes only see each other for Winthrop events or trustee meetings. Our trustee meetings are quarterly, and they're typically 2 consecutive days each quarter. And then we also have a retreat during the summer. And during those 2 consecutive days together, we always factor in meals together. So we offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the first day, and then we offer breakfast and lunch together on the second day. And so those meals are factored in. Usually we may incorporate some type of team building activity, at least during one of those 4 board meetings throughout the year. And then we also encourage trustees as much as possible to attend different type of campus activities. And so we all may get together and attend a game together. We all, and when I say we all, we just try to get good representation. So, you know, 5 to 7 of us may go to homecoming together. Another 5 to 7 of us may be at a play or something like that that's offered by the students on campus. A good majority of us will attend commencements and our beginning of the year activities each year, convocation, the picnics, things of that nature. So we try to make sure we are actively engaging. And then the last thing I will include in that is we try to also ensure that we are engaging within our committees, because we're all divided into committees, and we have those opportunities to connect further with our committee members. And then as a whole group, we also have touch points like a text chat and an email thread where we may check in with each other sporadically throughout the year as well.
Yeah, so it really sounds like on both fronts, both in building relationships and in terms of finding a way to increase your value and status, it's really like doing the work. I mean, whether doing the work is representing the perspective in the meetings, but showing up for whatever it may be the events are, like just by being there, doing the work, being involved is a way for people to get to know you and know that you have the best interest of the university and of the students in mind. And that's sounds like what all of you really have echoed.
Well, I do want to add to that really quickly, Sarah, two things. The first thing, in terms of doing the work, that's changed for trustees within the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. So there was a point in time where no one knew who the university trustees were. They weren't trying to be visible. They weren't trying to be active. They weren't trying to be seen. They weren't trying to be known. And they did not necessarily attend campus-wide events. But the change of culture has happened, and people want to see who their leadership is. They want to see their representation. So some trustees have kind of fought that. They've resisted it. And then younger trustees, such as myself, newer trustees have embraced it because that's the time that we're in. And I would contribute a lot of that to social media, because social media has made things more in your face and present. And then the second part of that statement too, Sarah, as it pertains to the status, I think when you are elected versus appointed, that also changes who you connect with. For instance, our alumni representatives are far more hands-on with our alumni group than other trustees are. Our appointed representatives are far more hands-on with the governor's office and the superintendent's office than the other trustees are. And then those of us who are appointed, we're usually far more hands-on with our legislators. So just about every legislator know who I am, and I know who they are, but they may not know any other trustee on the Winthrop University board. Because I was appointed by them, I consider it my duty to make sure I continue a relationship and I nurture the connections with them, whereas my counterparts may not think that. So that is a dynamic as well.
Sure. So y'all, this has been so invaluable, and I want to be, I guess, maybe real about this and just kind of close with one question. And Kelly and Aisha, if you can weigh in on this part of things, I think that Ashley has covered it. How has, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with thinking about how has serving on a board helped you, served you in your career, in your business, and I mean, we all do things because we are selfless and we want to make our communities better. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with thinking about, I mean, like Aisha, you said, as your kids get older, that you have kind of aspirations to do other things, or to, we level up, I guess, is like the video game term that everyone uses now. And so just, how has this experience positioned you, or do you feel like it will position you for what you feel like is the next thing in this leadership journey that you're on?
Sure, I'll take it first. It's been very eye-opening. When I was a defense attorney, you're only on one side of these things, and there's a very small portion of the bigger picture that you see, even though, when you're billing time, you think it consumes your whole world. Once I became a commissioner, then, of course, you see both sides of a disputed matter, but then you also see how the entire agency is run, how it affects citizens throughout the whole state, and that includes the employers, the business owners, as well as the workers, and as well as insurance companies. And so once you get the pieces and you put the puzzle together, you see your impact is much broader than you would have initially thought. So I think that it's helped me kind of gain a more macro view of our role as public servants. And I do take that very seriously. When you do government work, whether it's on a university level, whether it's, local municipalities, or on a state level, it is public service. And so having that broad perspective does help you in your mission to provide good public service to all of the citizens of South Carolina.
Thank you. Kelly.
Oh, goodness. We being in the restaurant business, it's sometimes not just about, the food you serve. Part of our model is very much about giving back to the community and growing into new communities. So for this particular appointment, it was just the opportunity to be able to connect with with organizations that need help, need resources, and seeing, where I can position myself to make a bigger impact in the nonprofit side of things was really a focus for me. And, hopefully there are more opportunities once my appointment is done here to be able to continue that networking with the nonprofit community.
Well, thank you all so much for offering your perspectives. Like I said, this was 3 very different kinds of boards, 3 very different kinds of scopes. Your work is all very different. Your backgrounds are very different, but I think this has been enormously insightful. And I think that it is likely that there are folks that are on this call that are interested in one aspect or another that may want to reach out to you. So we thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, for sharing, just being really frank with us about and honest about what your experience has been. We certainly appreciate it. And, thank you for representing women in all the places that you are working. I hope y'all have a great weekend. And we technically have a break scheduled. It was 11:30 to 11:40. So we have about 5 minutes. Do we need to take a break, or are y'all ready to just power through to our next discussion? I'm thinking head straight through. Everybody's ready. You made it this far. Okay, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and keep going in the chat. So thanks again, ladies, for joining us, and let's roll right into
Sarah,
our
I will say one last thing is representation does matter. And you all are needed at the tables, and whatever that looks like for you all, whatever capacity that is, your voice is needed, your experience is needed, and the way we process and handle decision-making functions is completely different, and it's needed at the table. So I will encourage everyone to be a voice, be heard, and occupy your space because they need you.
Thank you for saying, don't be scared to take that step. It's a little scary and a little overwhelming, but just do it. Because it's
thank you both for echoing that, because I think you all sort of touched on it too in terms of what the representation is. And women are 51% of the population in the state, and there are very few places where we can say that women are represented in decision-making circles at the 51% rate. And then we layer on all other kinds of diversity of experiences and race and background and qualifications and professions. And we need all of that. It's representing all of us, and we need all of those voices making the decisions that affect us. So thank you for saying that again. I don't think we can say it enough. Bye, y'all. Thanks again. All right, so now we're talking about expanded horizons. We've talked about different opportunities. We've talked about how to apply, where to find them. Now let's talk about serving on a statewide board. So we have a fantastic panel, and I have to give a shout out to our senator and representative that are joining us today. This has been a grueling lawmaking session. Thank you for being the very small minority that is representing women in our legislature. Thank you for doing this on a Saturday after you have been called back when you thought that it was going to be over, but we appreciate what you're doing. We can't thank you enough for continuing to fight the fight for us. So we have South Carolina State Senator Sandy Senn from District 41, which is Charleston and Dorchester counties. And she's on a number of different state Senate committees that represent and make decisions about who's appointed to boards and commissions. Like that process that Dr. Ashley mentioned was so rigorous. We also have South Carolina State Representative Beth Bernstein from District 78, which is Richland County, also on a number of different committees within our legislature. And then also Christy Quattrone, who is the Director of Boards and Commissions for Governor Henry McMaster. And Christy, before you joined us earlier, we already had a question for you that we've been banking until you joined us. So thank you all so much for joining us again. Thank you for making time on your Saturday. And maybe a good place to start is, how do you find out about opportunities to serve at the state or federal level? And whoever would like to jump in is welcome to do so.
I'll jump in. Good morning, ladies. This is Beth Bernstein. Thank you for your interest in South Carolina Will. I'm proud to be a founder. Barbara Rax, I see you. You're right in my screen. So for Richland County, it's really kind of reaching out to our delegation office. We have full-time staff. Some of the smaller counties might not, but we have full-time staff and we advertise different vacancies on the board. The Richland delegation office is run by Kim Johnha, and I have her number. If I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there, and we can probably put it in the chat, 803-576-1907. But we're always looking for quality candidates for our respective boards. We have probably about 15, I think, that we nominate, either that we directly vote on, or we recommend to the governor. I'm not sure how Charleston does it. If Sandy's on, she might want to chime in.
Yeah, and she may be having technical difficulties. I saw her a few minutes ago and I don't now. But Christy, if you maybe want to jump in and talk about where we can find state opportunities, and I will qualify all of this with this information is also in our GAP, our Governmental Appointments Project database. Maybe Emily can drop that link in again. We do have statewide opportunities there that you can learn more about. But Christy, are you able to, I know Christy also was traveling this morning and she's gracious.
I'm here.
All right.
I'm happy to help anyway. Okay, so thank you for having me first and foremost. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information because it can be confusing, quite frankly, about how to get involved. For state level appointments, the best place to go is the Secretary of State's website. And I say that knowing that in the past, people have talked about how, well, they don't really know if that information is correct or not. And so we have started sharing data, the governor's office has, with Secretary of State, and they have started sharing data back with us to make sure that throughout administrations, we can keep consistent, correct, and updated data. But that website is sos.sc.gov. If y'all want to share that, then once you get to that website, you need to go to searches, and then it's the boards and commissions button that you would press, and you can print an entire list of expired or vacant seats. You can also search by interest. The catch there is that the name of whatever it is you are interested in needs to be in the name of the board. So for instance, if you are interested in serving on DHEC, right, you would type in, the easiest way to do it is type in environmental, and then you will find that board. And what we cannot glean from that information is if an expired seat has been promised or is in process. So the best way to find out if you're really interested in one specific congressional district on DHEC, for instance, contact the governor's office, contact me, and we can let you know if that seat is available. If you just have an interest in serving, generally we can address that later, but to find out the specific statewide appointments that are available, that's the best way.
Good. And Senator Sun, I know you were kind of off and on, so I'm not sure if you heard Representative Bernstein's response, but we're just kind of talking about how do you find opportunities. And Beth already mentioned, we've obviously mentioned that we have a database available. I popped a phone number in that Beth shared. Is there anything, that pops out in your mind about how to find an opportunity to serve at the statewide level if someone's looking for a place to serve? Oops, you're muted.
Okay, better.
Yeah.
We gotcha.
I only do these like 15 times a week. You would think I would know how to unmute. So I'm here, and the only reason I'm here on a Saturday or Sunday, because usually I don't do these kind of things on the weekends, but it is to buck for more women to run for office. And I appreciate that you're willing to serve on a board, and I understand that some women, especially young women, are having to work. You're not there where you don't have to work all the time yet. So being on a board is certainly a good way to start. And there are so many different boards that you just want to pick what interests you and what you think you have a little bit of something to add to whatever that board is. So it certainly doesn't help if you're resume building, but really, I want to just say that women can win elected office. They just have to have the guts to take your hand and sign it on the form and make yourself a candidate. And I mean, more and more people just, if all things being even, if there are 2 males on the ballot and 1 female, the female is going to get a lot of those votes just because, but it is going to take work and it is going to take money. But we can teach you how to work smart and also to raise money.
Well, we appreciate you being an advocate. And I mean, I want to echo, when women run, they win at the same rates of men, just not as many women run. And part of that is people don't ask them. And so she's asking right now. So we know you're here to talk about appointed boards and commissions. And like she said, this is a good way to get your feet wet, to feel like you gain that experience and the confidence. But we are certainly here to help with both sides, both appointed and elected office. So thank you for that. I would love to talk about sort of experience and qualifications. And I mean, like, is it essential that you've served on another board before you apply for a statewide board? Like, what kinds of credentials and qualifications do you look for when you are deciding about appointments? And, Christy, from your perspective, when you're deciding what applications go from your desk on to recommendations, and I know that, it's different and not necessarily the specifics of, a particular board needs a plumber or a social worker or whatever the case may be, but more like what kind of level of experience, what kind of previous board experience is important to really be in consideration?
I think that this is one place where women get tripped up and we think that we're not qualified for some reason when we are fully qualified. You don't need previous board experience to be considered for a statewide board. What you need is experience in the area in which you are applying to serve. So when I look through resumes and people who are interested in serving, we really look for the interest and the experience levels that would occur with someone who, has participated in the subject matter, not necessarily participated on previous board memberships. Does that answer the question?
It does, absolutely. Beth, would you echo that when you are part of deciding about appointments? How much does previous service matter? How much does investment in the community that you've showed up, that you're an expert in whatever your particular profession is?
Yeah, I would agree with Christy. It's really showing an interest. I don't think serving on other boards necessarily is not essential by any means. I think showing an interest and understanding why you want to serve on this board, and you show that passion and interest, really that resonates. At least it resonates with me, and I think it resonates with a lot of the members on our delegation.
Yeah, Senator Sen. So we know you're here to advocate for women to run. And I think that hand in hand with appointed boards or running for office, and you said that y'all are here to help. The women that are in the legislature are here to help. So what role does networking play in statewide board appointments? Is it good to call and get in touch with your representatives? Is it good to get in touch with the people that are not your representatives that may be on the deciding committee?
Well, I mean, it always is. Anytime you're proactive, that tells somebody that you really want to, and especially if you're wanting it for the right reasons. And statewide appointments are maybe a little different. Those are a little more sought after, but there are so many other boards. If you're just looking to get your feet wet, there's a big list of boards that I see Christy's on here. It took me forever to figure out how to get the list of all the boards. If you look at them, you'll see sometimes they haven't met in years, so forget those. Sometimes they have so many openings that you don't want those either. But there are other really exciting boards that are not necessarily statewide if what you're doing is trying to resume build. But if you want a statewide board, I have to quarrel a little bit with what you said that you should be about a 50-50 candidate. Really, we're 51% of the population, and we are looking for more women and more diversity. There's no doubt about that. on boards and everything else. I think you're going to hear coming up soon, there's going to be a little bit of squawking about the education board and some things that people don't like. Santee Cooper might be another one that probably needs some diversity. So those things get raised a lot. And so don't shy away from anything like that.
Well, and if the questions are raised, then we need to be there to answer it with diverse women that are ready to serve. If the question gets answered and the candidates aren't there, then we can't address the problem.
But your rep, I'm sorry, your rep, if you meet with your rep, they are going to be the ones that are going to try and coach you through it. If you've talked to me and I'm convinced that your heart's in the right place and you're going to show up and do what you're supposed to do with this board, then I'm going to coach you through what you need to do.
The only thing I would add, Sandy, some of the boards in Richland County or the ones that we recommend appointments, I mean, there are some that there are vacancies, and I would recommend looking at the ones with vacancies. You don't have to look at the most sought after ones, because you can really make your voice be heard and really make a difference on those, whether or not there are vacancies or not. And so I hope Sandy would agree with that as well, that we need representation on all of these boards, whether or not there are vacancies or not necessarily searching for the most sought after ones, because I think you can make a difference and be effective on some of the ones that desperately need people, like Foster Care Review Board.
Right, absolutely. And I didn't mean to say don't go to some boards like that, but there are some boards, if you look at them, that have, I guess there was a reason they were formed at some point, but if you get that long list of boards that we have in the state, and I'm not talking about county-wide, I mean, every county's different, but there's a bunch of state boards that you wouldn't really call them state, but they are statewide boards, but there are like, 8 positions and 7 are unfilled and they never meet. So you don't want those.
Right. And, there's even, I think the tobacco one has never met, has lots of vacancies. And Christy, maybe that's a question or something we can talk offline of how we can get some of those boards filled, and some of the women in South Carolina will, or other people that we know who would want to serve and maybe get that up and moving, because there are some important boards.
Yeah, so there are a few boards out there like that tobacco. I can't remember the full name of that tobacco board off the top of my head, but the money that was that came out of, I guess, the Attorney General's office for that one has been spent, and so there's really not a need for the board. And I'm not sure that there's a mechanism to end unless the boards are sunsetted, when the money runs out, or when they're defunded, or whatever the case may be. There are a variety of boards out there that are like that. I agree. But I also think that there are a variety of boards out there that are not filled, that have the potential for women to really take a leadership role. And if it's something that's important to you and you see that it's floundering, then I think the best thing to do would be call our office or call your legislator's office and let them know it's something you're interested in. And then we can work together to get those boards, what we call defunct, I guess, I don't know what other word you would use for it, up and running again, if there's the potential for them to be, of service and contributing to the state. And I think that is a real opportunity for some leadership. For one person or a group of people to take hold.
Thank you. Well, so we've got a bunch of women here who want to serve, and we had a question, and I can see people saying, well, if we've got vacancies, can I serve on 2 or 3 boards at the same time? If I'm willing. Christy, can you speak to that and the sort of dual office holding rule that as it applies?
Yes. So generally speaking, you can serve on 1 board. There are certain situations where you can serve on 2 boards, but they are few and far between. What I would recommend is finding your place, right? And getting appointed to something that you are enjoying. The secondary part of that is that if you get appointed to something and it's not really a good fit, you should speak up, because there's so many different spaces where you can serve. There's no reason to be stuck serving somewhere that is just not really fulfilling. And I think people sometimes are worried that if they say this doesn't really work for me, that we're gonna say, well, sorry, you got your chance. That's not how it works. Once you're in the system and are willing to serve, we are more than happy to move a good board member somewhere where they would prefer. We've also set up on our website a place where people can go in and express interest in boards and really name the top boards they're interested in. It's on the governor's website. And it's the governor's website is governor.sc.gov. You kind of have to scroll through and go to the executive branch button, then go to the boards and commissions button. And if you scroll down, there's an expression of interest form. And that goes into our system where we can then match people in the correct area of the state if that's required with the interest level and the experience level to a board that may have some vacancies. If people really are interested in serving and can't really, they just want to get on a board and see what that's like. I think that the general public positions on the licensing boards are a great place to start. A lot of them are not Senate confirmed. A lot of them are, but you cannot have any experience or be licensed. I guess I would say you cannot be licensed by the board. You have to be sit. So in other words, the nursing board has a general public member. They can't be a nurse. They can't be licensed by the board. Or the pyrotechnics board has a general.
Oh, we might be losing Christy.
It's like a robot turned on.
That's kind of an interesting one, but you cannot be licensed by that board. And so that's a good place. Sorry.
Well, that's a super good tip that there are
still there.
We are. You were kind of slowing down or cutting out for a minute.
So, but that would be a good place to start if you needed some ideas. I'm sorry about that. I was saying the license is a good place to start with the general memberships.
Got it. Thank you so much. Let's see. Well, we had some questions about the legislative delegation in the chat, but I think that we've kind of worked through some of those.
And I should emphasize, feel free to reach out to your senator, your House member, or women who are serving in the legislature who might not be your particular representative. But our office, I'm always willing and able to help anybody who is interested. And particularly my knowledge is for Richland County. But please, feel free to call my office and we can help you navigate this process, because we really want women to be engaged. And the one thing I think that you want to take from this seminar, whether or not you're serving on a board or not, you've got to be engaged. You've got to be involved. Look what's happening at the State House right now. Women's rights are continually being tramped on. So the only way to combat that is to have our voices heard. And the more numbers we have, the louder we can be.
Well, and I think that I would like to tie in. I wanted to ask a question about what role politics plays in statewide board appointments. And I think that the fact that you and Senator Sen are on here together today, and what we have seen over the past several months with women uniting regardless of politics in our legislature, is indicative that women want to help each other, and that we realize that regardless of where you're coming from and what your perspective is, we need the perspective of women from all across the board. So, would you maybe, if you want to, or if you feel like there's an example of how politics has come into play in the appointment process, but really maybe more so just about, commenting on how women really do want to help each other, want to, make sure that we get these voices heard.
Right. Well, from my perspective, Beth, I don't mean to step on your toes.
You can.
Yeah, but so from my perspective, I have people reach out all the time, as I'm sure does Beth, especially of this whole abortion thing. And they, go, we're happy, we're proud of you, keep fighting. But my response is always, I don't care what party you're in, we need for you to run for office. 5 of us on the Senate side. Beth, I don't even know how many, but it's 14% total women.
Right. We lost a good number. So I don't know the actual count. We might have 20 out of 124 ladies. So, I mean, we're in a really small percentage.
And
We
so,
lost a net of 4 this past year.
yeah.
Lost 4
Which
women.
I don't want to like spew a ton of statistics, but that reverses a decade-long trend of increasing the number of women. So we are set back 10 years after the 2022 election in terms of women's representation in our legislature.
This is not a partisan organization, but I will tell you, we lost 5 African-American women in the Democratic caucus after this election. And those voices need to be heard too. We need diversity. We need women, but we need diversity among the women as well.
What happened there, Beth? I mean, I've heard some of that was redistricting. And so did they get drawn out in such a way that they were targeted?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but yeah, redistricting was a big factor. And I think just there was a momentum for the Republican Party, and Democrats just did not do well across the board. We, as a party, really didn't come out in full force. And so some of our strong candidates lost to some really weak Republican candidates, but they won their primary. And I think another thing that, and I know we're deviating from the topic here, but this is really important. You can't just vote in November. You've got to vote in June. June is becoming almost as important or more important than the November election, because I mean, Sandy, you know that more than anything, because I think it's more on the Republican side that you're forced to go more conservative because of that vocal minority that comes out in a primary. And
the primary in a Republican race is the most important. There, not too often do you get, not now, not so quickly after redistricting. The election is really not going to be held in November. So yes, and that's when everybody wants to outright each other. But at least in my district, people are a little more normal. We're not like crazy right, crazy left, a little more to the middle there. So
yeah, mine leans D, but it's a very purple district. And I think you have better representation when you have more competitive districts. Honestly, when you have the districts that aren't competitive, you don't have good representation. And, we're 10 years, we're stuck with these maps. So we'll just have to get our women and get people who want to be involved more engaged and part of the process. And in the House, the women, we do stick together on some issues we try to find. I mean, it is very unique what's happening in the Senate with the Republican women and Democratic women working together on this social issue. The social issues in the House, it's a little bit harder. All of the Republican women were in support of the 6-week abortion ban bill. All of the Democratic women were in support to fight against it. You don't see that in the House. And the 6-week, when you get to 12 and 20, you're going to have some differing views. But I'm really proud to be able to work with the sister senators and really want to try to emulate what they've done in working together. On other non-social issues, maybe we can work together in the caucus, the respective caucuses, but right now in the House, we're not able to do that. And I think
you had one or two that were on the cusp and just chickened out, and that makes me sad. But the one in particular was a brand new electee, so I can understand why she was concerned, but you almost had a little support there. If they're being honest, some of them are true believers, and I get that, and I don't fault them if we're back to talking about this particular social issue.
Right.
Same thing with the men. I mean, if they've got their hearts on the sleeve, the ones that are at the pulpit and they think it's a pulpit, but it's a well,
like that.
They're true believers. I can't fault them for that, but it's the ones that sit quietly on their hands knowing what they're doing is not right. I got a problem with them.
Well, and just to bring us, back around that elected office is super important, but appointed office is another way to make your voice heard. If running for office is not for you or not for you right now, there are so many ways that we can positively affect our communities and let women's perspectives be heard whether it's at the statewide level or at the local level. So if all of this politics kind of, makes you cringe a little bit, I think that appointed boards are an opportunity for it to be less political. And I want to be real about the fact that politics is going to play some role in it. But if we all, get out there and make our voices heard and be willing to serve in our communities, then collectively we can make a difference. Well, y'all, thank you so much. Is there anything else are there any questions that we haven't already addressed from the audience, or anything else that any of our panelists would like to chime in with in terms of, something we didn't touch on that's really a critical piece of information for women that are interested in serving?
They are going to ask you some very personal questions if you get to the statewide level. And in fact, it's overly ridiculous. Beth doesn't participate in this, but the Senate has confirmation powers, and they ask detailed financial information, your husband's financial information, your adult children. I have started fussing about this, and I think you're going to see them revising some of the applications because it was off-putting, but not for some of these smaller boards. And it's not all political. Remember, like for instance, if you don't like litter, try to get on the Palmetto Pride board, animal issues, things that are not going to be necessarily divisive. There are boards like that.
I'm glad that you touched on that. I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, you go, Sarah.
I'm glad that you touched on the personal questions. I mean, that's the kind of thing, so that people are prepared. We had the previous panel discussion. One of the members of the panel had been appointed by the legislature, and she mentioned some of that criminal record stuff and the financial thing. So I think that it's good for people to be prepared and ready, knowing that you need to be ready. Either be ready because you feel like everything is on the up and up, or be ready to talk about it and explain it if there's something that may be questionable.
I think my main thing that I would like to say is that I want women to want to apply to these positions. We need women represented on these boards, and a few of the bigger boards were kind of thrown out. It was like, there aren't many women on these boards, and not many women apply to be on some of those boards, or even make it known that they want to be on those boards. And so I think that it's, having the confidence to go ahead and get out there and say, hey, I want to serve, and I want to serve in a big way. I think that women need to take that and run with it, because we have so many qualified candidates. When a woman does put their name in the hat, 9 times out of 10, they are extremely qualified, and they are taken up on that, point of interest. So I just think that it's important to know that we need people to want to serve on some of these boards.
And to not discount yourself, to not discount your qualifications and say, and not that all different roles are important, but don't feel like you have to isolate yourself to some volunteer role at your kid's school. Like, go for it, go big. If your interest is there, if you do feel like your qualifications are there, don't be shy, go for it. And I think that Women in Leadership is here to support you, and your representatives are here to support you. And the women that are in positions of leadership, whether they're your representative or not, are going to be willing to help you get the answers you need, get to the right people. Just ask the questions and let folks know that you're interested. So I think this is a perfect, I was going to wrap things up with sort of a call to action. And I do want to thank all of our presenters and panelists for all of the different perspectives that they've represented throughout the conference today. I want to thank Duke Energy and Blue Cross Blue Shield for allowing us to put this conference on, to educate you and encourage you to serve in whatever capacity is right for you, whether it's appointed office or elected office. And again, we will be sending post-event email out at the beginning of next week with replays and slide decks and panelist contact information and presenter contact information. We'll gather up all these important links that we've dropped in the chat so that you can access those. And we'll also share some other upcoming educational and training opportunities that we're going to be offering. But we want to send you off with a call to action. And I'm going to you guys are getting a little bit of a preview or some inside information. On June the 1st, we're going to be announcing a major recruitment campaign for women candidates for both elected and appointed office across the state. We have set the lofty goal of tripling the number of women who are applying for public boards and commissions and running for elected office between now and 2024. Triple. And That's a big number. But we feel like we can accomplish it with women like you. And we need you to also refer people. So we want you to run, we want you to seek office, but we also need you to ask other women that you know that you would be proud to represent you, for them to run, for them to seek office as well. So we're going to share, Emily's going to share some links in the chat. If you're ready to run, if you know someone else that you would like to refer, that you would like us to contact, to share more information about how we can help train them, how we can help prepare them, please let us know. We need your help. We need your help all across the state, so that whether it's finding a board or commission in your area, whether it's, finding an office that is politically opportune for a woman to occupy, we are here to help, and we need your help, and we need your neighbors' help, and we need your mom's help, and we need your sister's help. So anyone that you can help, you can bring in, let them know what we're working on and how we can help them to get into those positions. It's critically important for women's perspectives to be represented. We also have a post-event, and I'm sorry, Beth, we have a post-event survey. We're having a little bit of problems with our poll. We were hoping we'd be able to pop it in here, but if you would please, when you get the post-event email, if you would take a minute to answer those survey questions, it really helps us determine what trainings you need in the future, how effective is the information that we are presenting, and it also helps us share with our sponsors and with our other funders, what these trainings offer for you, so that we can continue to offer them in the future. So Beth, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, and I would love for you.
Didn't. No, I agree, and I just wanted to reemphasize. Yeah, I hope more women will get involved, and I love the goal of tripling our current representation. It's lofty, but it's definitely attainable, and I'll do everything I can do to help as well.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate everyone's support. We appreciate you taking time on your Saturday morning. I think that speaks volumes for where all of you are coming from and how you want to serve in your community. So we're excited to see all of your faces on an ongoing basis. We are going to be offering tons of opportunities for all of you to connect and learn over the next year and a half. The filing deadline for most offices is the end of March next year, but we have a lot of ground to cover in terms of getting everyone ready to file. Lots of opportunities for boards and commissions, which are equally as important. So thank you all again for being here. Like I said, we'll be sharing information, but please know that we have a very small but mighty team at South Carolina Women in Leadership. And if you contact us, we're going to get you connected with the right person to get you the information that you need. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces on the trainings, and we just can't thank you enough for participating in your interest in serving. So thanks again to all of our presenters and panelists. And I'm going to send you off with a few extra minutes, but I think that our brains may be full of everything that we can handle for one day for today. Thanks everyone.
Weekend. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Y'all too. Bye-bye.